Good afternoon, everyone. I am Riya Malhotra from the Energy and Resources Institute. On behalf of TERI, we welcome you all to the technical session, Maximizing the Benefits for Climate-Friendly Cooling Through Successful Implementation of the Kigali Amendment. We have gathered here for a very important discussion today. Sustainable cooling presents a multi-sectoral opportunity to address the developmental and climate challenges India faces. It's now the time to think through mechanisms to scale up the efforts ongoing in the country and design new techniques to maximize gains for climate-friendly cooling. With this background, TERI under the initiative SHEETAL, Alliance for Sustainable Habitat, Energy Efficiency and Thermal Comfort for All, and in association with Natural Resources Defense Council, is happy to host our distinguished speakers and participants. We feel honored to have with us Mr. Sanjay Seth, Mr. Aditya Narayan Singh, Mr. Kanwaljit Jawa, and Mr. R.R. Rashmi for our inaugural session. I request all the speakers to come up on the dais. I welcome you all. I would now like to call upon Mr. Sanjay Seth, Senior Director, Sustainable Habitat Program, TERI, for the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Riya, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Also, a very warm welcome to all my esteemed panelists on the dais for the plenary session. I have, of course, put Mr. R.R. Rashmi in place of Mr. Abhay Bakre, Director General, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, since he's caught up in some parliamentary matters and he requested his absence from the meeting today. But nevertheless, I'm sure that with the insights that are going to be provided by Mr. Rashmi, they will be very, very welcoming for all the participants this morning. So, again, to all the participants, I welcome you all for this event today. A very warm welcome to all my panelists, and of course, representing different agencies. We have Mr. Aditya Narayan Singh, who's the Additional Director from the Ozone Cell, Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. We have Mr. Kanwaljit Jawa, President, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Manufacturers, which we popularly know as RAMA. And of course, Mr. Rashmi, who is a Distinguished Fellow and Program Director in TERI. So, building back from COVID-19, we need to integrate resilience in our climate actions, awareness, fostering dialogues and sensitizing stakeholders on the aspects of climate impact on our environment. To set things moving, TERI has collaborated with expertise around the world at maximizing the benefits for climate-friendly cooling through successful implementation of the Kigali Amendment, for which we've all gathered here today. And the aim here is to pool our knowledge and experience and learn from each other to pave the way for low-carbon pathways and cooling access. The IPCC's recent report on climate change impacts, adaptation and vulnerability makes it clear that intensifying heat and humidity in India could be increasingly challenging for people to survive. The recent trends of heat waves in the parts of South Asian countries have exposed the risks to the global communities. In India alone, March 22 was the hottest month in the previous 122 years of historical data recorded by the IMD. The last year's COP26 held at Glasgow, and we led the Glasgow Climate Pact, combined with increased ambitions and actions from countries, means that 1.5 degree remains in sight and scales up actions on dealing with climate impacts, but it will also only be delivered with concerted and immediate global efforts. Going back in history, let us recall the resolve of the global economies to formalize the Vienna Convention for the Protection of the Ozone Layer and the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Since then, global efforts continued to protect the environment through a series of events, with the recent Kigali Amendment to Montreal Protocol aiming to phase down HFCs to avoid up to 0.5 degrees of global warming. Undoubtedly, the cooling sector has been the biggest consumer of the ozone depleting substances. The cooling sector is an important enabler of both comforts and economic growth and has direct consequences on the environment. The growing demand of cooling in India needs to be tackled in a manner which is both environment friendly as well as affordable. We at TERI, and especially my division, we are doing a lot of work, especially aimed at thermal comforts of, making sure that when we're talking of the housing sector, how we really integrate thermal comforts as a holistic dimension within the housing sector. And we're working very closely as knowledge partners with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and also with the industry partners towards this endeavor. Accelerating the actions post-Kigali Amendment, the leadership shown by India in adopting value-based initiatives in the form of India Cooling Action Plan and ratification of Kigali Amendment are positive steps towards sharpening the focus of cooling on creating a positive impact to the economy, people, and the environment. At this time, when ICAP provides a 20-year perspective headline goal for India's cooling sector to reduce cooling demand, cooling energy demand, and refrigerant demand by 2037-38, there is a need to support the implementation of ICAP through measures like policy advice, analyzing the detailed sectoral actions, facilitating multi-stakeholder exchanges. Our work in the cooling sector aims at providing access to cooling in order to reap socio-economic benefits and improve welfare, achieving significant reduction in energy demand for cooling. And India achieves a significant reduction in cooling demand through efficiency in the cooling of appliances, better passive designs, building codes, behavioral change, and the regulatory interventions aligning with India's commitments to sustainable climate. It is a part of this larger objective. TERI, under the initiative SHEETAL, which is an Alliance for Sustainable Habitat, Energy Efficiency and Thermal Comfort for All, and in association with Nrdc, is organizing this workshop today on maximizing the benefits for climate-friendly cooling through successful implementation of the Kigali Amendments, with participation of stakeholders from government, industry, academia, and to think through the aspects of future strategies for India to phase down HFCs, sustainable adoption of low GWP refrigerants in India, cooling sector, and the role of energy-efficient equipment and buildings in India's efforts to meet these amendments. I look forward to the deliberations today. We have important sessions that are lined up post-lunch, and I'm sure that the deliberations will really provide the pathways towards all of the above. We are also gathered here. We will be, making the most of today's workshop. We are going to be releasing a series of publications which have been put together by various partners. And let me just read them out. What are we going to be releasing in this session today? So energy efficiency pathways for India's room air conditioning. So that is one. Indian chiller sector towards low GWP refrigerant transition. Accelerating ECBC implementation in India, scenarios for future Indian HFC demand compared to the Kigali Amendment, and then of course energy saving benefits of implementing ECBC in Gujarat. So these are some of the publications which are going to be released by all the esteemed panelists who are there on the dais in the plenary session. So I thank you once again for coming here, and let's hope that we have very fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your welcome address. Now I request Mr. Aditya Narayan Singh, Additional Director, Ozone Cell, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, for your valuable remarks. Over to you, sir.
Sri R.R. Rasmi sir, distinguished fellow TERI, Mr. Kamaljeet Java, MD, DAKIN, Sri Sanjay Seth, Senior Director, TERI, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. It gives me pleasure to be a part of this workshop on maximizing the benefit of climate-friendly cooling through successful implementation of the Kigali Amendment organized by the TERI. As we all know that cooling requirement is cross-sectoral and is an essential part of economic growth. And cooling is needed for a wide range of applications like space cooling in buildings, food cold chain, mobile air conditioning, healthcare, cold chain, and process cooling. Cooling interconnects three predominant international commitments: NDC under Paris Agreement, the Kigali Amendment to Montreal Protocol, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As most of you may be aware that ozone cell is associated with implementation of Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol on substance that deplete the ozone layer is an international environmental treaty under the Vienna Convention for protection of the ozone layer. The protocol regulates the production and consumption of ozone depleting substance, which aims at phasing out of ODS in a stepwise manner with different timetables for developed countries and developing countries. Developing and developed countries have common objectives but differentiated responsibilities with binding, time-targeted, and measurable commitments. India has been successfully implementing the phase-out program of ODSs in the country and has phased out production and consumption of chlorofluorocarbons, carbon tetrachlorides, halones, methyl bromide, and methyl chloroform for controlled application as per the Montreal Protocol schedule. Currently, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, commonly known as SCFCs, used in refrigeration, air conditioning, and foam applications are being phased out as per the accelerated schedule of the Montreal Protocol through HPMPs. I am happy to share India has voluntarily followed a low carbon development path in HPMP stage 2, known as SCFC phased out management plan, while phasing out SCFC by adopting non-ODSs, low GWP, and energy efficient technologies in its HPMP. The HPMP has been developed in the manner that industrial obsolescence and adverse economic impacts to the industry are minimized and the compliance target of the Montreal Protocol are achieved. As you are aware that the 28th meeting of the parties to the Montreal Protocol held during October 2016 at Kigali, Rwanda, decided to add HFCs to the list of the controlled substance under the Montreal Protocol and approved a timeline for the gradual reduction of the production and consumption by 80 to 85% by the late 2040s. This led to the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. As per the agreed phase down of HFCs under Kigali Amendment, India will have to complete its phase down the production and consumption of HFCs in 4 steps from 2032 onwards, with reduction of 10% in 2032 and 85% in 2047 respectively. As you all might be aware that in September 2021, the Government of India has ratified the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol for phase down of HFCs. It has also been decided by the Union Cabinet of the India to develop a national strategy for the implementation of phase down of HFC in consultation of industry stakeholders, and work has commenced in this direction, and inputs from all concerned stakeholders will be sought during the process. India has taken proactive role in the area of climate action through India Cooling Action Plan, which provides the framework for taking action in a synergized way in different sectors to secure both environment and social benefits. A key message of ICAP is to take synergistic actions with respect to addressing cooling requirement across sectors. Synergistic actions have a higher impact than either of the action taken in isolation. The strength of ICAP lies in engagement and collaboration amongst all stakeholders, government, industry, R&D institutions, and think tanks, and civil society bodies. I am delighted to share with you that action points relating to implementation of recommendation for the space cooling in buildings and cold chain thematic areas have been finalized and circulated to the concerned ministry's department agency for implementation. Ozone Cell MOFCC has recently initiated a study with focus on thematic areas and proposed recommendation of the ICAP, such as good management practices for energy efficient building by introducing passive cooling design, and good management practices for cold storage, warehouse hubs, infrastructure highlighting application of non-HCFCs and low global warming potential refrigerant-based energy efficient cooling systems. Studies that have been completed by the ozone cell are available on the ozone cell website. Through the said international agreement, particularly the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, we see a rapid transition towards new low GWP refrigerants that are mostly flammable, toxic, or operate under high pressure. Low GWP refrigerants are safe, but only if handled and regulated correctly. The training of service personnel is a priority to be addressed to improve servicing and handling of such refrigerants. Training and capacity building of service technicians is being taken up as a priority area under HPMP Stage 3 to be implemented from 2023 to 2030 under the Montreal Protocol. The program of training and certification of service technicians will be developed and implemented in close cooperation with Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, the AC manufacturer, the industry association, and GIZ, the implementing agency for servicing sector under HPMP Stage 3. India is conscious of the need to protect the global environment and continues to proactively fulfill all its international and national commitments under the Montreal Protocol. With these words, I thank the TERI to inviting me to participate in this workshop and look forward for the successful outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable remarks and giving us insights on the various initiatives. Now I would like to call upon Mr. Kapil Java, President, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Manufacturers Association, to come up on the stage and give us some valuable remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Sanjay Sethji, and other dignitaries from the Energy and Resource TERI for inviting me to speak here today. Thank you, Mr. Aditya Singhji, Additional Director, Ozone Cell, MOEF, for your remarks. Thank you, Mr. Rashmi, who's sitting on the dais, and thank you to all the panelists for taking time to be part of this session today. Amongst all the delegates, participants from academia and industry, my views come from my 4-decade experience in the heating, ventilation, air conditioning industry as a Rama president now for the last 2 years. I hope you all will indulge me maximizing the benefits for climate-friendly cooling through successful implementation of Kigali Amendment. That's the brief which has been given to me. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue that is being brainstormed here is clear as daylight when India officially ratified the Kigali Amendment, joining 125 countries. The entire heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration ecosystems was going to be in the spotlight, and rightly so. Although HCFC and CFC are used in hundreds of other household items, I'm sure such industries are also innovating best ways to reduce their own climate impact. No one really refutes that good that has come through actions followed under such global conventions and protocols over last 2 to 3 decades. The Montreal Protocol succeeded in phasing out 99% of ozone depleting substances, and report says that ozone layer will reach pre-1980 level by 2070. According to the UN, if not for the protocol, the whole over the Atlantic world would have increased by 40% by 2013. I think concerted action from all stakeholders over the last decades have saved millions of lives and livelihoods. The Indian HVAC industry also, under this lens, because we will become the largest air conditioning market in the world and most populous nation on the planet. According to the international agency, the global demand for air conditioning will grow 3 times till 2050, and India may actually see 4 to 5 times rise. On top of that, billion plus people in a hot country like India, living conditions and food security cannot be ignored. The pressure on power generation of the country is well documented under the Indian Cooling Action Plan, since AC requires relatively higher power compared to other household items. As I can see from the industry standpoints, there has to be multi-pronged approach to realize the Kigali Agreement targets. Actions like customer stakeholders, education, and knowledge disseminations are needed immediately. Ongoing technical actions like product innovation need to be accelerated, but most important is the collaboration and the trust within the industry and all the stakeholders. I am an eternal optimist when I approach this problem. India growth story is the biggest opportunity for us. Big market potential leads to big responsibility to implement the most practical and sustainable solutions. To decelerate the climate impact, we must to reduce the power consumption. This will come from use of high efficiency appliances, their refrigerant uses technology, and positive regulatory amendments. Policies based on ICAP strategies, Rama did a study with guidance with the BE and Big Bang transformation. There are millions units still in operation today that are old and working at the lowest efficiency. These old systems need to be replaced with efficient ones, particularly the air conditioners which are being used still before the energy labeling standards came. This can only be done through the affirmative government actions, incentivizing and educating users. We have a good example of how government pushed for early adoption of strategy for electrical vehicles. If done correctly, it will have great benefit, skill development of installers, additional GST revenues, less stress on grid, and a structured e-waste procurement and disposable systems. From a refrigerant standpoint, there is a need to find the right balance between the climate impact production economies and diversity of applications. We can agree that there is no ideal one-size-fits-all solutions. There should be a policy that accepts diversity of refrigerants and promotes continuous innovation towards refrigerant applications. The process of innovation is long and fluid. We must find an appropriate solution and with largest positive impact. Till a few years back, the most used refrigerant was R410A with the GWP of 2000. But now the refrigerant of choice across the world, thanks to Daikin, is R32 with the lowest GWP of about 700, which is 1/3 of R410A. R32 is more energy efficient, lower refrigerant charge is needed, and is easier to reuse and recycle. It results in smaller and more compact products. Very recently, we released a further 123 patents related to manufacture and use of R32 refrigerant in air conditioners. I am proud to say that now total 299 patents are freely available without the need for prior permission or contract. We do this because we know that there is not a better, safer, and more efficient refrigerant in the market today. Consequently, replacing R410A and many cases old R22 will be a significant step to reducing carbon emission. Collecting refrigerants, reusing and disposal of such refrigerant is the right way forward. I am happy to say that in the last decade, Indian heating, ventilation, air conditioning has revolutionized. My company has proudly contributed to this change. We were the first one to introduce VRV products, first to launch inverter air conditioners, first to discontinue R22 instantly, and first to adopt, educate, and demystify the benefits of R32. We have worked very closely with MOEF and also with some of the senior directors of TERI. As an industry, we have supported government's intent on power saving by agreeing to set default temperature in commercial units to 24 degrees Celsius. We walk the talk about our intents and capability. The point I am driving here is that we lead product innovation through sustainable solutions. More has been done in terms of innovation than we get credit for. The products such as VRVs, inverters, heat pumps, and low GWP refrigerants have been tested in the furthest corner of the world under stressful conditions and still pass the test of highest efficiency. We have to build on this. We must drive down costs through R&D and economies of scale and create the market and grow the market has been our mantra of success in this field. Across the cold, frigid temperature zone, burning gases and oil for heating is predominant. Highly regulated regions like Europe, the use of heat pump ACs need to be advocated, as they have a much lower environmental impact. On the other hand, now we are witnessing frequent heat waves across Europe. For our industry here in India, there is a great opportunity to manufacture and supply highest efficiency products at competitive cost. India can help other countries achieve their climate-friendly cooling goals. In June 2020, our Honorable Prime Minister set the vision to become self-sufficient in air conditioners. This shows the remarkable long-term vision of the government, which balances sustainability with the market opportunity. The production-linked incentive schemes for white goods recognizes the air conditioning industry as a champion segment under the Atmanirbhar Bharat program. Our industry has reacted to this Prime Minister clarion call of Make in India, Make for World, investing in a big way to create local manufacturing infrastructure. There are more than 43 companies which have participated in this Abhiyan. The quality standards of Indian manufacturing ecosystems are not lost to anyone. Refrigeration Air Conditioner Manufacturer Association and other associations collaboratively, constructively in ideating and evolving the PLI scheme. This scheme will build scale and skill through sustainability. Employment generation through sustainable manufacturing ecosystem will be achieved in the next decade. We are in the sunrise industry and are setting new benchmarks in domestic and overseas market. The expected growth of over 15% over the next 10 years is very high for the supply side, economies to match, penetrating untapped markets and catering to high demands can be foreseen. Friends, as a humble representatives of the world's largest and biggest air conditioning company, operating in India, soon to be the biggest AC market in terms of demand, penetration, and climate condition, it is imperative that my company and my industry's views on the matter are taken seriously. I say this with utmost sincerity. Unfortunately, I am missing Mr. Bakre, who is not here today. We have already been interacting with him on the proposal of the old air conditioners which are energy guzzler to be replaced. And these are the serious issues as sustainability and climate change. We don't take things for granted. As a representative of Rama and also representing Daikin, I reiterate our commitment to working with all stakeholders to develop innovative air conditioning, heat pump, refrigeration solutions that meet consumer demands while mitigating effects of global climate change. Daikin is the only manufacturer in the world to produce air conditioners, compressors, as well as refrigerants. Our core business of air conditioning is basic need transforming indoor comfort around the world. We recognize our responsibility towards people health through humidity control, indoor quality, and comfort ventilation. As a company, we aim to continuously grow and develop our business while benefiting the society and the environment. Our society goals are: first, we are not here to pay only dollar taxes. We are committed to sustainable developmental goals while recognizing the changes, expectations, and opportunity for our society. As the global air experts, we strive to create values with air under the vision of sustainable development from within and outside our industry and also Daikin Group. I once again congratulate Mr. Sanjay Seth of TERI to taking this lead and Nrdc on holding such workshop for the greater good. Thank you. I am looking forward to the interactive sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable remarks and sharing your experience with us. I would like to call upon Mr. R.R. Rashmi, who is a distinguished fellow and a program director for Earth Science and Climate Change at TERI, to share his views.
Thank you, Ria, and a very good afternoon to all of you. Thanks to Mr. Seth, I have been put in this spot between your lunch and Mr. Bawa. But let me try and give you my take on the subject which is being discussed today, maximizing the benefits from the Kigali Amendments. Mr. Seth, Mr. Bawa, and Mr. Aditya Singh, they represent a very important segment of the industry, society, and the thinking community, which is leading this entire effort in making cooling affordable, accessible to everyone on the terms which we can meet our climate change challenge. Now, I have had the privilege, or rather the good fortune of interacting with some of you. Aditya was my colleague in the ministry at some point of time, and we were all actually struggling with this issue. So if I give you some insight into how we agreed to the Kigali Amendments, I think it will give you a signal as to what is it that we can do in the future. You know, when we were thinking about whether India should agree to the Kigali Amendments and what stand India should take, the two things which actually worked in favor of the government of India agreeing to this, one was the willingness of the industry. You know, in fact, most of you must be knowing that India by today now has one of the largest penetration of the HFC 32 based refrigeration equipment, and this has happened very fast. It has not happened because of any government regulation. It has all happened because of the willingness of the industry to accept these changes and implement them faster. So the industry preparedness or the industry willingness was one of the key factors which shaped the decision of the government at that point of time. There were many discussions, several rounds of discussions, of which I had the fortune of being a part of that. And we noticed the readiness of the industry at that point of time to be able to accept the future challenge. And that's how the government started changing its mind at that point. So the short point that I'm trying to make is that any change or any strategy, if we want to implement in the future, the determination and the willingness and the capability of the industry will be one of the key factors. I'll come to that once again in the second part of my intervention. The other thing which really tilted the balance was the energy efficiency. You know, again, it was felt, of course, the cooling sector is based on refrigerants, and the refrigerants contribute to the global warming. But you will be surprised to know that the contribution to the global warming was the least important factor. In fact, as most of you must be knowing, that the per capita consumption of the refrigerants in India is one of the lowest. Compared to the US, we are just 1/20th of what they are consuming and emitting and contributing in this sector. So the contribution to the globally warming scenario because of the cooling sector is one of the lowest in the world. I mean, we are not responsible for that, and we don't have to feel guilty about it. But the point is that there is growth. The industry is growing substantially, and India is one of the hotspots of the world as far as economic growth is concerned. And cooling sector happens to be located in the center of that growth. You know, the people who have studied the growth in the power industry, the energy industry, they are saying that the energy consumption in India is going to be, the cooling industry is going to drive this growth of consumption of the energy, particularly in the urban and the rural areas. So we need to be conscious about this. Even if we don't contribute much to the global warming in this sector, we need to be conscious of the role that we can play in the growth of the energy sector. And that's why energy efficiency is a very important consideration. And this consideration also weighed in favor of India agreeing to the Kigali Amendments. So these were the two fundamental considerations. And I think those considerations are as important and as relevant today as they were 7 or 8 years ago. We are a growing country. Cooling sector is going to grow. Energy consumption is going to grow. So we have to be mindful of the impact that we are going to make on the kind of the energy scenario which we are going to face with. Yesterday you have seen that the Government of India has reiterated its commitment to emissions intensity target, or rather, in fact, they have raised the emissions intensity target. They have now said that we will reduce our emissions intensity by 45% compared to 2005 levels. And emissions come from all sectors. Cooling happens to be one of them. And you're aware that the cooling sector is going to contribute in a very, very large manner to the growing energy consumption. And we have analyzed this situation at some length. We feel that the energy efficiency is very important consideration in the initial phases of our growth. But beyond the point, energy efficiency cannot drive the reduction in energy emissions intensity. It has to be, carbon-based, which means we have to decarbonize the economy. And decarbonization includes sectors, all sectors of economy. And cooling again comes to the center of that consideration. So therefore, we have to be part of a global momentum towards decarbonization, which looks at more energy efficient, but at the same time, low GWP chemicals and refrigerants. How we do that, of course, will again depend on the industrial innovation and to a certain extent on the government regulation. But as I was trying to tell you, that the government regulations play the least sector in this kind of industry where the industrial innovations dominate. The preparedness and willingness of the industry to contribute by and large plays the largest important role. I'll not take much of your time. The only one additional point which I wanted to make was that we should not depend only on the national policies or the policies which are being framed at the industry level and at the national level. We have to go down to the states. We have to work with the agencies at the and the stakeholders at the local level, in the rural areas, in the people who are planning and building the cities, people who are regulating the growth of the urban infrastructure in the states. They are the people who need to be talked to, and their considerations and their concerns should be taken on board. That is why when Aditya Singh was talking about a synergistic strategy, what he meant was that we cannot depend only on the equipment, chemicals, and the industrial innovation. We have to take into account the kind of growth that we want to happen, the kind of infrastructure which we are building at the state level. And that is why the kind of urbanization, Mr. Seth is here, he leads that part of that industry, where the kind of urban infrastructure that we are building, we need to be imaginative about it, innovative about it, and see what are the best technologies which we can deploy there, so that our requirement of the cooling refrigerants goes down. We look at a large spectrum of choices and options before us, which include cooling, which include low GWP refrigerants, but it becomes part of a larger ecosystem where we look at the comfort, the cooling comfort, thermal comfort, and the efficiency of infrastructure also. I'll stop here, and thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to a very constructive discussion in the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable remarks. We have reached to the significant part of this plenary session, where we will be releasing the publications that were mentioned by Mr. Seth that are very important to this segment. And this will be also available for the public use. I request all the eminent panel to release the guidebooks and the publications. Thank you, sir. I'm sure these publications will benefit each and every stakeholder in this segment. Before we end this plenary session, I would request Mr. Seth to present the mementos to the eminent panel. I once again thank all our eminent panel on the dais and all the participants for joining us today. You may proceed for the lunch. We will connect back again after 1 hour. Thank you. And the first session is on the topic, Options for Refrigerant Transitions to Maximize the Benefits of Implementation of the Kigali Amendment. I request all the eminent panel for these sessions to come up on the stage. We have Mr. Achyut R. Kulkarni, Applied and Unitary Stream Leader for India and SAC Market, Train India. We have Mr. Kapil Singha, Managing Director, BP Refcool. Mr. Rajneesh Khosla, Scientist E, Bureau of Indian Standards. Mr. Sameer Kwatra, Policy Director, Nrdc India Program. I would also like to invite Mr. R.R. Rashmi to come up on the stage, and he will be moderating this particular session. But before we move towards the panel discussion, I would request Ms. Prima Madan, Nrdc, to come up on the stage and set the theme for this session on the topic, Options for Refrigeration Transition, Maximize the Benefits of Implementation of the Kigali Amendment. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Riya. Very good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to all our distinguished panelists. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I am Prima Madan, and I work with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'll just be putting a bit of things in the context and also presenting of analysis that has been done jointly with TERI, Nrdc, and senior level colleagues from the cooling fraternity. A lot of things have been said today, and year 2021 was quite a year with positive developments at the Montreal Protocol level. President Biden announced US ratification, China ratified in July, and India's ratification followed in September. So it was a very eventful year. It is often said to really, to solve the planet's climate problems, it is important to get cooling right in India. That's largely because of the sheer growth in cooling that we are going to see in the coming years. Therefore, India is extremely important for the success of the Kigali Amendment as well. India ratified in September, and it was a very timely ratification. And as we go along, so the next 2 or 3 years are again important to really set ourselves for success, so that we are able to maximize the gains in both in emissions and as well as in terms of time as we face down HFCs. So with that in mind, we started this study, TERI and Nrdc, along with some senior members from the cooling fraternity, to understand how India's HFC demand could potentially look like, which sectors will play a greater role, and how these transitions can potentially play out. The idea is, it is an if and then analysis. This is not an attempt to predict the future, but to present the options for discussion. And as India now, really gets on with the path to design its national strategy, which will be concluded by 2023. So with that in mind, we started this study. The study basically evaluates the 3 scenarios for India's HFC demand trajectory compared to the likely control obligations under the Kigali Amendment. It is based on the current and the projected demand for HFC using equipment, also the refrigerants which are currently in use and likely to be used in the future. So that's the overall, that's what the study is about. And the larger objective, it was really done with 3 objectives in mind. Mapping the current Indian HFC demand trends, and how does the Kigali implementation would lead to reductions in HFC usage. What are the opportunities of order and pace of this phase down as we go along? And in that process, highlight the priority actions that are needed to achieve the Kigali Amendment. The study, followed a very robust review process, and it has now been published in a high-impact scientific journal, Environmental Research Letters. It included experts, both Indian and international, from cooling fraternity, and the assumptions were extensively vetted by the industry experts. In terms of the methodology, what does the scenario analysis, it really does? So the scenarios, we talk about 3 scenarios, and I will get to those in a minute. These scenarios were developed based on refrigerant demand model that estimates the India's total annual demand for refrigerant in GWP equivalent terms from 2016 to 2050. The data that we used is refrigerant demand data that has been based on India's HPMP2 and other studies that have been done by some experts recently. And also the demand growth model assumes some sectoral growth rates for each of the sectors to understand how the equipment sales are going to look like going forward. We've also attempted to estimate India's baseline that could potentially be, for the HFC phase down under the Kigali Amendment that could be used. And the assumptions are around what are the useful life, what is the leakage rate, and the specific refrigerant type that could be, that are largely derived from a market research. This is just to give you a glimpse of the results. I will be quick at this because the study is now released this morning and available for all of you to go through in detail. The HFC demand in India in 2020 was 23 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and as we all know, it's driven largely by the space cooling sector of room air conditioning, DX, VRF, and also the MAC, which accounts for nearly 2/3 of this demand. When we projected this into the future, the demand would grow to 185 kilotons by 2050. Just so you know that these 2 numbers are not exactly comparable, but in the paper we also have a number of 29 kilotons of HFC demand in 2020, which will grow sixfold by 2050, is 185. So this is a sixfold increase, and as we all know, driven by two major sectors. Coming to the scenarios, the first scenario that we analyze is a market trend scenario. Now, this scenario is basically assumes that no additional steps would be undertaken in addition to the current scheme of things, the current HFCs that are being used. No additional steps would be taken. The market will go as it is, the way it is in the current scenario. And in this, the HFC demand projection is about 76 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Here, I would just like to highlight one point. This would have been far more, as Mr. Dakin also mentioned this morning. The room air conditioner sector is now largely based on R32. So if that transition wouldn't have happened, this number would probably have been higher. So that was a major achievement from India's perspective. And the Kigali implementation, the baseline that we have estimated it to be 65 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent on the current market trends. Moving to the Kigali Amendment scenario, now this scenario is basically talks about the additional steps that would be taken to really effectuate the HFC transitions across the sectors so that we comply with Kigali Amendment. So this scenario really talks about how this will look like. And here the HFC, the number here is 57 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent versus the 76 million metric tons in the previous scenario, which was a market trend scenario. The pace of HFC demand reductions is gradual in early 2030s, but accelerates later. The table on the right here shows the kind of assumptions we have made, which refrigerant will play potential what role, and what are the transition timelines that could be worked around in the manufacturing transitions during this for the Kigali implementation. So these are the assumptions that we have really developed in consultation with the industry. Now, to give a bit of a twist to things here, we explored a third scenario, which was a Kigali Amendment scenario with some acceleration. So advancing the acceleration, transition date for the space cooling sector, which is a predominant sector in terms of the HFC demand, by 5 years leads to an additional, reduction in the overall HFC demand projection. Now, in this scenario, the demand really peaks at 40 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2028, and we cumulatively avoid an HFC demand of 337 million metric tons. So these are a lot of numbers. I know it'll take time to absorb, but please go through the study and we'll be happy to discuss further. Some of the key findings: max sector could be the first to transition. I think this is what the industry is probably expecting. The HFO 1234YF is technologically and economically feasible. India has domestic production of this particular refrigerant. The second is move to the low GWP alternatives in space conditioning. I mean, we know we have R32, which is a big achievement, but we would have to go lower than that if we have to comply with Kigali. And if you were to deploy this by 2025, it will be quite an achievement in terms of reduction in the further HFC demand. And then third finding is that effective leakage prevention and reclamation. So establishing a reclamation program to decrease cost and environmental harm is a priority action that could be taken up as we prioritize our national strategy. The fourth is moving the refrigeration away from R404A and shifting the smaller refrigeration units to hydrocarbons within the next few years. And finally, the fifth is that we need to start in a timely manner so that we can have lower costs and greater emission reduction, and really to avoid huge build-up of HFC-based equipment in the latter half, and which leads to larger cost in the latter half of the transition period. So we really need to start in a timely manner. So these were some of the key findings. I would conclude by highlighting three key takeaways for us. So we need strategic transitions to climate-friendly alternatives. They need to start in the mid-2020s and redoubling them in 2030s. Of course, largely, this is an important thing, I think, an important key takeaway, that if you rely on technologies which are known and commercialized today, they would potentially be sufficient for India to be on track for its compliance under Kigali, which is relatively a good news for us. And starting with the readiest sector is the way to go, and giving time to other sectors where we need more innovation, more research and development. So I will leave all of you with these three key takeaways, and I will pass on to Ashish, and very keen to hear from our distinguished panelists on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Prima. So to move ahead and about the study that we have carried out at TERI, Indian chiller sector towards low GWP refrigerant transition, when the Kigali Amendment is already on place and the country has the targets for HFC phase down with the overall goal of reducing the emissions to 0.5 degrees Celsius. So the study we carried out, keeping in mind the practical scenarios that the industry might face during the transitions and how these transitions are going to be there with the equipment, and the equipment we chose was the chillers. So current market dynamics of the chillers is the component market, which comes from the compressor side, the refrigerant side, then the condensers, expansion valves, and other components which are very key components and are when assembled, then they make a finished product. Then we have the demand users, buildings, process industries, those who use these chillers for the space cooling purposes. Then we have performance and safety standards, policies, and regulations, which are deriving the performance and the safety of these chillers, low GWP refrigerant-based chillers, if going ahead with the Kigali transitions. Then we have chiller suppliers, traders, HVAC consultants, those who are the real users or the prime users of the chillers when delivering in the market. So we conducted some stakeholder consultations with the key stakeholders from the industry who were representing the chiller manufacturers, HVAC contractors, and then we just gauged what is their perception of going ahead with this transition of low GWP refrigerant. You can see, so we scaled it on the scale of 5, and what we figured out that from the point of view of market adaptability, the first thing that comes into the mind of any chiller supplier or chiller user is the availability of the compatible components. So this is the highly prioritized area that a chiller manufacturer prioritized. Then comparatively better life cycle cost of chiller, including the cost of refrigerant, including whether the components are available or not. So this is again the highest priority factor for them. Then the safety characteristics, because of the safeties associated with the alternative low GWP refrigerants. So this is again a very high priority factor for them. Then robust supply chain of low GWP refrigerant, whether the low GWP refrigerant that is currently available for a chiller manufacturer would also be available after some point of time. Whether the some component which is currently available for the chiller manufacturer of the low GWP refrigerant would also be available after some point of time. So this is the supply chain, the regular supply chain, that is again a prime high priority factor for them from the market adaptability point of view. And GWP of the refrigerant is obviously something which is driven by the Kigali Amendment, driven by the Montreal Protocol, but from the market adaptability is at this point of time is the least priority sector for them, least priority for them. So they are there. So altogether, the industry is willing to move ahead with the transitions. The thing is that this should be combined with the energy efficiency of the component, energy efficiency of the finished product. What are the barriers for adoption of low GWP refrigerants in chillers? Currently what we are seeing is the risk pertaining to the supply and availability of the new low GWP synthetic HFO refrigerants, lower readiness of chiller component market, the reliance of chiller industry on compressor manufacturers, challenges of affordability, inadequate proficiency of servicing technicians and contractors, those who are dealing with the equipment, feeble financial support or the subsidies from the government side, then complexity with the installed chiller systems at customers' end when we are going for the retrofits. So there are no clarity on how these retrofits will take place, because any system needs certain modifications when going ahead with the integration of the refrigerant. So I'm leaving this note open to the panelists, and I request Rasmi sir to take us through the panel discussion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ashish. And once again, good afternoon to all of you. We have started the session a little late, so we were supposed to start at 2 and finish at 3, so we are now starting at 2:40. So keeping that in mind, let me introduce the subject to you first and then request the panelists to throw light on the issue. In the morning we heard the additional director talk about a strategy that government is thinking about for HFC phase out. As you know, there is currently no commitment, but the industry is ready. Industry is showing its willingness and readiness to adopt innovative ways of making the transition faster and in an earlier time frame. The baseline for reduction and ultimate phase out is 2028, and we are supposed to finally bring it down to 85% sometime in 2047. But the track record of the industry tells us that we can do it faster and in an earlier time frame. That is the result of the study done by Prima and her colleagues, that we should do it. I mean, early start was the fundamental message which came out of her presentation, was that we should start early to be able to, sometime in the middle of 2020, if not latest by 2030, we should start adopting low GWP refrigerants to be able to make this transition faster and focus on those critical sectors which can do it earlier, where the industry is ready with the equipment, the standards, and the manufacturing and servicing capability. So she has listed out some of the sectors. And Ashish gave you a specific example of chiller industry. And there you must have understood from his presentation that the challenges as industry perceives are not that of the availability of the gases, availability of chemicals. That is the least consideration for them, if you have noticed that. The fundamental consideration for the industry is safety, supply chain, and components, availability of good components, which they can service easily, affordability of those components. So these are the challenges before us. On the one hand, we have to ensure that we start early in terms of HFC transition and ultimate phase out. And the second challenge is that the industry, while it is willing to make that change, it looks at the safety, supply chain, and the affordability as one of the major considerations. So given this frame, the range of issues before us, I'll now invite the panelists to throw light on this. Fortunately, we have two representatives from two very large industries, one from the government and one from philanthropist and environmental organization. So we will have a range of views on the subject. Let me first invite Mr. Achyut R. Kulkarni, who represents Train, and you are all familiar with Train. This is one of the leading manufacturers in this field. The question which I would like to put to him is how he sees, how the integration of lower GWP alternatives can be incorporated in the Indian chiller industry. From Train, the experience of his industry and others, what does he have to recommend to us? Mr. Kulkarni.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks for the nice invitation. First of all, that's not the okay. So first of all, thanks for this invite, and I think really, really proud to have all you guys on this forum, and thanks. No, it's not there only. I think he's not copied, Ashish. It was given to me in a pen drive. Pen drive. Okay, so by the time they upload the PPT, first of all, thanks once again, and very happy to hear that India has already ratified the Kigali Amendment. I think that's one of the bold steps that we have taken as an industry, so very great to hear that. And most importantly, I would also like to feel happy about that we have taken chiller as one of the benchmark to work on this particular amendment. So very informative discussions happened. I think Ashish also gave us some insights about the chiller, particularly the market dynamics. First of all, I would like to inform that we are not in such a bad situation wherein we really had to fear about this transition. This transition is very easy. And from the chiller perspective, I'm talking from the chiller perspective, maybe from the room air conditioning and commercial unitary segment, it may be a little challenging what we see now, but from the chiller perspective, it's definitely one of the easiest transition I would like to say. Today, if you look at Train as an industry or as a company, we have taken a stand that whatever chillers we sell, particularly in the centrifugal segment, we are going to go ahead only and only with HFOs. So that's the stand what we have taken, and we have seen success in that. And believe me, we have sold more than 300, 200, 300 chillers, which are already running in and around across India, where are all with HFOs. So from large capacities to small capacities to medium capacities, any kind of a requirement, be it for any application also. When I say application, it could be applications for data centers where we have a very high chilled water living temperatures. It could be for commercial buildings, ITS buildings. It could be for any process industry for that matter, where you need chillers at a very low temperatures, sometimes in negative temperatures as well. So be it any industry today, be it any segment today, the solution is available with HFOs. So from the transition point of view, for a particular compressor, when I say compressor, centrifugal compressor, we have seen it as a very easy transition. Coming back to the second one, which is a screw transition, screw is particularly a little challenging compared to centrifugal. For various reasons, the capacities are small, the cost is comparatively higher when we look at large capacity centrifugal chillers. But having said that, we have seen even the screw chiller market picking up, it's actually picking up with HFO as a technology. So the transition is easy, the transition is not that difficult. But how do we go with that transition? There is a mindset that needs to be built on. So that mindset actually plays a very important role. So for Train, from the Train perspective, we have set up a mindset, we have set up a challenge. We call it as a gigaton challenge. Maybe I'll just run through a couple of slides on that gigaton challenge. So that's where we work on those challenges and we try to make sure that we meet the goals, whatever we have set for. It's just like the way we have all seen, like the way the dates are announced and then we actually go ahead and then start preparing for it. So that's how it works. It's not just on, I want to change, no, it cannot happen. Once you have a deadline in front of you, then definitely you're going to work around it. So that's something, and in fact, not just Train per se, a lot of other companies also have come on with these challenges, though they name it different. Like say, for example, if I have to speak about our colleagues Carrier, they call it as gigaton goal. If we have to speak about Daikin, they call it as Fusion 2025. So each and every company today in the chiller fraternity is working towards this carbon reduction. So that's one of the key sustainability goal that is being picked up by all manufacturers. And we are happy to share that each one of us are marching ahead towards this goal. So that's something. I have just put a brief that the market, which is expected to grow close to 31.5 million by 2030, which was currently 8.5 million in 2019. That's close to 4 times. So that's the market we see where the HVAC is going to go in India. And it is very important to implement certain strategies to decarbonize buildings. We heard about decarbonization sometime back when in the first session. So that's very important. We need to really work upon the decarbonization of the buildings in India in order to make sure we reach the goal. And on the carbon emissions, if you look at it, around 15% do come from HVAC and from buildings. So that's very important factor. Today, if you look at the number, it is very small, but down the line, the way things are growing, the way things are moving ahead, I think that's going to be one of the key area which we really had to look at. Okay. Okay. I think there's some problem with the presentation, it's okay. So what does this gigaton mean? It means that to reduce the carbon footprint, which is equivalent to 200 million passenger cars driven for 1 year. So that's what the challenge is. When we say gigaton challenge or a gigaton goal for that matter, it is equivalent to 200 million passenger vehicles driven for 1 year. So if you're going to stop that all of a sudden, so that's what the carbon emission reduction we are talking about. And or the CO2 emissions from over 100 billion gallons of gasoline that is being consumed. So it's a huge number. And if you look at it globally from the global point of view, it is equivalent to annual emissions by Italy, Spain, and UK. So if you combine the emissions of all these 3 countries, so that's equivalent to 1 gigaton of carbon reduction. So that's something which we are talking about. That's something which we have set up as a goal. Okay, so where do we stand with that? Currently in 2014, we announced this target that we want to bring down the carbon emissions. And if you look at the progress, we have already reduced 20 million metric tons from our products compared to a 2013 baseline. And around 30 plus countries, we are already selling the products which are with HFOs. So that's the achievement. And in all these countries, we don't have a regulation yet. So the countries where we do not have a regulation, we are still going ahead and then propagating the HFO strategy. So that's something which is very important, and that's something which we have taken up as a goal, and where we are marching ahead. So very uniquely positioned, if you look at it today, and where do we stand in 2030? Because the challenge is 2030, we want to reduce it by 2030. The global carbon emissions from heating and from the food loss. So we also work, we also have the food chain, the transport food chain company with us, where we call it as Thermo King. We have also targeted to reduce the carbon emissions from the refrigerators or the units that we use for our Thermo King, from our Thermo King product band. So from the food loss, we are targeting to bring down the emissions. What actions? Clean technologies, very, very clean technologies. That's something which has been addressed upon. The most important factor is the system energy efficiency. Because today when we speak about, we all heard the refrigerant emissions in India is very, very minimal. What matters most for us is the efficiency. We cannot trade efficiencies with your HFOs, with your refrigerants. So that's very important. We need to bring down the efficiency, and I think Government of India has already played a very important role in bringing up the BEE energy labeling program, which actually address this concern, where we have to meet certain efficiency standards in order to give the products or sell the products in India. So that's something which is very important. Reducing food loss from cold chain, transition out of high GWP refrigerants. So that's one thing which is been adopted. We have also seen the kind of refrigerants that are being available. I think sometime back we saw those in the slides, particularly for the chillers. And good part is that I was just talking in the morning, we also came to know that we can now give our 1233 ZD and HFO refrigerant that is being used for a centrifugal chillers from India. So good part is that we have also started getting these refrigerants manufactured locally. We are able to give these refrigerants locally. So the HFO refrigerants are being made available in India, and it can be provided from India itself. So that's something which is a very easy transition where we can easily opt out from high GWP. And like-minded companies to join movement, I think that's very important. As I said, in our chiller fraternity, all the companies have come together, and then they have come up with a goal that they want to reduce the carbon emissions. On the Gigaton challenge, I just explained about it. So where do we stand with respect to our commitment and goal? In fact, if you look at it, we are very proud that we have overachieved our commitments. On the product side, if you look at it, the commitment goal was 50% and the results is around 61%. So we have already reduced 61% of carbon emissions from the products that we produce. And from the operations, if you look at it, the target was 35%. We already stand close to 50%. So that's an achievement from the product and the operation perspective. So this is something we all heard about it, that we want to bring down the temperatures by 0.5 degrees. So what exactly is that 0.5? Whether it will make a difference, 2 degrees to 1.5 degrees. That's what the challenge is. So what exactly it means? I don't want to explain this slide. It is very self-explanatory. I got this from one of the leading newspaper, and it was an article that was being published there. So which actually means small changes and big impacts. The one what we are fighting right now is for this, wherein we want to bring down the emissions and then make sure that we live in a beautiful world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni, for demonstrating that the corporate leaders can actually do what they commit. And it's a good example of a large manufacturer having set out to declare a very, very ambitious target and then achieving it to a large extent. The only point which I was not clear whether this 1 gigaton is a cumulative figure or is it a annual emissions figure which you are talking about? Cumulative figure. Okay, thanks. So the next speaker with us is Mr. Kapil Singha, and he is a managing director of the BP RefCool, and he has long years of experience in this field, and he has worked in several countries abroad, Middle East, Asia, Pacific region, with a focus on fluorochemicals. He is also a member of the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning. So with your experience, Mr. Singhal, we would like to hear from you, what are the challenges before the Indian refrigerants industry, and how do you think we can make substantial efforts towards HFC transition?
Thank you, sir. So, when we talk about challenges, probably we need to slightly go back and understand what Kigali Amendment, what are the dates which are important for us and globally. So probably I would just try to explain, overview of how big or small is the challenge or opportunity which lies from these dates and numbers. Some of the numbers are known, some of it is not known. So let's try to understand from an industry perspective, when we say if we want to leapfrog or do something, how it is going to impact us in future. So, so this is the picture from the day when the Kigali Amendment was signed. You can see in circle, this is the date 10th to 14th October 2016. So we are sitting in 2022, so we have plenty of time which is already passed when we have this Kigali Amendment already there. Why I have that circle of 2016 is when the Kigali Amendment was getting signed, that also plays some role. So what we see on the screen now is non-Article 5 countries, so developed world, US or Europe or something. So we have non-Article 5 main group. So let's talk about the main group. So if we talk of main group, in 2016 we signed globally it was ratified. So we know Kigali Amendment is real. And the baseline years for HFC phase down for non-Article 5 countries was average of 2011, 12, and 13. We are signing in 2016, so we are having a baseline which is a past number. When we say past number, means probably, I'm not too much expert on those geographies, but probably the refrigerants which were used in 2011, 12, and 13 were the refrigerants which were higher global warming potential. So like 410A and 404A, and probably some more applications where the baseline was very rich. And in 2016, we knew that yes, this is a rich baseline and we are going to work on that. And then there was addition of 15%, which is not circled, but just 15% of HCFC baseline, which I'll explain during our India charts. So the phase out schedule, which from signing in 2016, the first impact in 2019, and in 2024, which is just 2 years down the line now, there would be 40% reduction as compared to the baseline, which is average of these 3 years and 15% of SCFC baseline. Fine. So in 2024, will be 40%, or those economies would be 40% of the entire baseline. Now, what's there in for India? So we are in Group 2 of Article 5 countries. Now, in Group 2 of Article 5 countries, signing in 2016, we have baseline years of 24, 25, 26. 24, 25, 26. And in 24, 25, 26, average of these three is going to be something probably we may not have those low-hanging fruits, because as in the first session, we already know R32 is already, probably we are the largest economy to use R32 at this scale. When the refrigerant which it is replacing R22 or 410A with GWPs of 1800 or 2000 coming down to 675. Probably for this we are going to use AR4, so 675 is the GWP number for R32. So same is with 404A replacement, same is for other replacements. So probably we are not going to have a very big baseline which is going to come in future. What means it for me as an industry person? I need to keep my sleeves rolling, because when it comes in 2026, we figure out the exact number in 2027. Probably it will take us 1 year to evaluate. If it takes 1 year to evaluate, in 2028 we need to freeze. Means we can't grow more than that. But there is a good part to it. It's not so scary. We have 65% of SCFC baseline. SCFC, we know, we are already working on SCFC phase out. So SCFC phase out, which is 1608 ODP ton, if we turn those numbers into GWP ton, or million metric ton of carbon equivalent, probably it is going to be around 20 million megaton. Now, if 20 million megaton, whether it is going to be significant or not, I don't know as of now, because we don't have those numbers of baseline, because it's future. But what is there important for me as an industry person, we need to learn fast to work on safety issues, standards, implementing technology in a very fast manner. We need to experience all what is going on, because probably for us to act from 26 to 28, we are going to have very small, because we need to first calculate our baseline, which may not have low-hanging fruits of high GWP enriched baseline. We may have a very tight situation for us, and we will have to work on. So probably that's what's going to impact. This is just a small numbers which are important. Like this is how the baseline will be calculated based on the GWP or ODP tons. Fine. So I feel I feel for us in India, probably we need to be ready for 2024 to 2028, because we are not going to play test cricket, we are going to play T20. We need to hit every ball in those 2-3 years, so we need to prepare ourselves. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singhal, for that caution and that exhortation that we need to prepare ourselves for a much faster transition, and the challenge is going to be great. We will not have much leeway there at that time. So we have to be ready, and the industry, the government, and all the stakeholders will have to put their best foot forward. Thank you very much for this, and let me now invite Ms. Khushbu, who is a scientist from the Bureau of Indian Standards, to give us an overview of what the role and development of Indian standards are, and how they can expedite the country's efforts to adopt low GWP standards. Ms. Khushbu joined the Central Marks Department of the BIS in May 2016, and presently works in the mechanical engineering departments associated with the standards related activities. And let's hear from her as to what the standard setting agency in the government thinks about the challenges before the cooling industry. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. And with the brief introduction that sir has given me, I'll just go about with what BIS does. So, Bureau of Indian Standard is the national standards body of India, and we develop Indian standards. So, before moving on to the question that sir has raised, I will just like to speak on the standards and why standards are important. So, standards are important because they help us achieve safety, quality, and reliability of a product. When we talk about in terms of why it is important for industry, it is because it helps in achieving a process and helps in streamlining the method that is being involved in manufacturing of a product. And when we talk about in terms of government, it helps in making policies and regulations. For users, definitely it helps in achieving the safety and reliability and performance of a product. So that is an important key factor. So we are talking about the standards and how they are going to help us achieve the Kigali Amendment. I would like to inform you that the Refrigeration and the Air Conditioning Sectional Committee of Bureau of Indian Standard, which is under the Mechanical Engineering Department, has developed about 56 Indian standards related to refrigeration and air conditioning. And definitely we have worked also in the area of natural refrigerants and low GWP refrigerants like A2, A3 refrigerants and all. And we have a standard like IS 16656, which is an adoption of ISO 817, which deals with the designation and safety classification of refrigerant. Then we have a series of 16678 from part 1 to part 4, which talks about the safety of heat pumps and air conditioning equipment, its design criteria and everything. And definitely giving a focus on addressing all the safety requirements for different kind of refrigerants that are being used in the industry. Lately, we have also adopted the IEC standard, which focuses mainly on the safety of A3 refrigerants. We are listening from morning, we have heard quite a lot about how the safety is a prime factor when we are looking of adopting or going through the natural refrigerants for getting the A3 or low GWP refrigerants in line. And in that, the standard has already been adopted, and also with the help of MOAFCC, we have conducted a study with Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. And the results, the study report has been available with the committee, and the committee is presently working on what recommendations for India's specific requirement needs to be added. With the help of RAMA, which has provided us the boundary conditions for the study that has been carried out. So shortly we will be amending the standard and even proposing it at an international forum on what additional risk mitigation factors can be incorporated in the standard. So that is one aspect. Also, BIS has signed an MOU with the International Association of Ammonia Refrigeration, and with the help of IAER, we are in line of developing standards on ammonia-based technology. Already a standard is under publication. It will be released shortly and available for ammonia, but there are other parts also related on the same subject, which the work has to be initiated. And we are also in the process of starting work on the cold chain sector. So there's a Indian standard available on the walk-in cold rooms, but we are yet to cover many other aspects related to cold chain. So we are going to do that, and we are in process of doing that. Also, in one of the presentations, I saw that mobile air conditioning was also an important sector that has been identified in the study. So we have an Indian standard which deals with the efficiency calculation, the thermal efficiency calculation for heating as well as cooling for the mobile air conditioning, and the draft for the air conditioning, the performance standard for the air conditioning standard for mobile air conditioner is also under development. So yes, so Bureau of Indian Standard is definitely developing many standards which are already developed and developing many standards so that we as an industry together can achieve Kigali Amendment targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kindu, for this update on the work being done by the BIS. And it's good news that they already have developed or in the process of developing a standard for the mobile air conditioning sector. They have already done it. So that's a good news, and which means that the necessary conditions for helping the industry move forward at a faster rate are being created, and certainly the help will be forthcoming from the government as well. Let me now invite Mr. Samir Quatra, who is the Policy Director for Nrdc India program. He's based in Washington, and Mr. Quatra has worked in the field of clean energy, environmental, financial and engineering sector for the last more than 2 decades. And he has a lot of experience in working with the Indian industry and the cooling sector and the related issues. So certainly, and he brings a global perspective to us. So Mr. Quatra, over to you, and you can tell us what is the update on the HFCs in the US and other major global players, and what is it that we can do either with them, learning from them, or what is it which is relevant in their work for our context.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rashmi and fellow panelists. Very informative presentations. And greetings, everyone. So I'm very happy that, at least this room is not super cooled as it was earlier. Oh, how ironic that would have been. We're talking about climate-friendly cooling. So I'll definitely discuss, what's happening in US, other parts of the world, but I really was struck by the cricket analogy that Mr. Singhal gave. So allow me to indulge in continuing that for a minute. So the way the Kigali Amendment has been scheduled, if you look at India's group, which is actually just 5 countries aberrant, most of the world is in other group, but in India's group, let's say, we were playing a 50-over cricket match. And we have a target of 250 runs. So the way our group has been positioned is that you can make 90 runs or about 100 runs until you reach over 40. So play at a run rate of 3 runs and over. And then in the last 10 overs, you have to play at a run rate of 15. Make 150 runs in the last 10 overs. Now, any of you who play cricket or follow cricket or any other sport will know that's not a good strategy. Like even if you have MS Dhoni or whoever else in your team, that doesn't sound like a good strategy, right? But in this case, it's even more complicated because it's not just, every run is the same, that you have to make 250 runs before your allotted quota is over and you will win the match. No, because if you play slow, the rest of the world is already playing and they might overtake you and still win the match. So it's not just about, reaching your goal in allocated time, but keeping an eye on what's happening in the rest of the world. So again, if you visualize that slide of the phase downs in those 2 groups, the rest of the world, developed world, and most other countries, just fast forward 10 years from now. 2030, not even 10 years, forget about 10 years, go to 2029. Just 7 years from now, the group 1 countries would have already phased down 70% of their HFCUs. That's when India starts. India starts its batting when others have already chased 70% of their target. How's that, an even playing field? It's not. So what Mr. Singhal was saying, we need to start thinking now. What Prima was saying, the importance of timely action is so critical to think about because the rest of the world is not waiting for this innings to end when they start playing. They're already playing cricket. and they're going to overtake. If Indian industry has to be competitive in the rest of the world, we can't start after 15 years when the rest of the world has already moved on. We need to start right now. And again, to stretch the cricket analogy even further, go back to the presentation that Prima made. We also have power play overs here. We have these mobile air conditioning, which is almost as big as air conditioners, room air conditioners. 28% of the entire pie is just mobile air conditioning. And that already has alternatives available. You think of chillers, like Mr. Kulkarni pointed out, already for centrifugal chillers, they have moved on. They have moved on to HFOs. For screw chillers, they are planning to move pretty soon. These are our power playovers. If you think of India's innings, we understand, the air conditioning industry still needs some more R&D, more competitiveness in terms of alternatives available. But we have, other sectors as well that can start right now. So now shifting to what's happening in the US and in the rest of the world. So, the good news is 129 countries have ratified the Kigali Amendment. Now, this is stupendous. In a world which is so divided, Montreal Protocol continues to be a beacon of hope. Many of you would have seen the social media forward, which skeptically says, hey, whatever happened to that ozone hole that people used to talk about? Nobody is concerned about that anymore? Of course, because, countries came together and showed that, human beings are not terrible. We can actually work with each other and, despite geopolitical differences, solve a global problem. So Montreal Protocol is one of the most successful environment treaties. 129 countries have already signed on. India has ratified last year. China has ratified. So, this is on the way to be another success if countries act fast. The US has not ratified yet. Now, if any of you follow the US political theater, you'll know how difficult that is. But what happened at the end of fag end of 2020 was the US enacted American Innovation and Manufacturing Act, AIM. Now, that enabled the US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, to set rules to regulate HFC production and consumption. So EPA has already started working with the industry and set rules on audits, on reporting. Now, many industries would say, we don't want to tell you how much refrigerants we've been using. That's confidential business information. But the rules say that this is in public good. This is what the country needs, what the global community needs, and now that is no longer CBI. There's more disclosure of HFC use. There is a proposal to have QR codes on every HFC cylinder. So every cylinder of HFC can be tracked. So with the AIM Act, industry has already started acting. And a lot of global industry is recognizing that this is where the market of the future lies. If you were into manufacturing railway engines, you're not going to start with making, coal-fired engines. That's not the future. If you were starting an auto manufacturing facility, you'll probably be thinking of, electric mobility, right? American industry has realized this is the future, so they pushed the politics in the US to set rules. They want the US to ratify the Kigali Amendment as soon as possible and set rules for phase down of HFCs so they can already move on to the next big market. Call it capitalistic mindset, whatever. But when it works for the climate goals, it can be effective. So, industry's push has resulted, well, I shouldn't say just that, but a lot of civil society organizations, support from industry, and some of the more forward-thinking political leaders have resulted in even Kigali ratification garnering a lot of support in the US Senate. So regardless of what happens politically, whether that gets passed, not passed, it seems likely, but you never know, the US just based on that AIM Act and the rules that the EPA has enacted and the competitiveness, futuristic determination of the industry, is already on track to exceed its Kigali Amendment goals, not just meet. So here are the rest of the world teams who are going above their run rate while we are preparing for 3 runs and over. They are on track to reduce 85% of HFC use in the next 15 years by 2035. Remember, we have, we are playing a test match. We have until 2047. But we don't really have until 2047 because we operate in a global market. We cannot be, lagging far behind the rest. So that's what's happening, globally, especially in the US, where we're based. And, that's just to reiterate what already my fellow panelists have already said and the presentation that we saw earlier. So I'll just pause here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Quatra, for highlighting so eloquently the challenge before the Indian industry. That the message that he brings is that the US industry is moving very fast on this and will be able to not just meet but maybe surpass the goals that have been set out for themselves, despite the lack of, despite the fact that they have still not ratified. But sometimes the politics works in very strange ways. They were the leaders of the entire amendments, but they have not ratified themselves. But that is beside the point. The point is that the industry is ready and they are moving faster, and that puts a competitive strain on Indian industry. As you said, India operates in a global environment. So Indian industry is exposed to competitive stress. And if it doesn't move fast enough, it will have problems in the global trade. And we are also exposed to global trade in a number of ways. So the message coming from all the 4 speakers today is that we have to do a number of things, that the challenges are mounting, that we must act fast. We must, of course, to be able to move faster, we can focus on some critical sectors like mobile air conditioning or chillers, or depending on the preference of the industry and its readiness. The government is always there to help the industry. The standards body at least has already started work in this area, and more help will be coming forth if the industry requires. So that is the general situation. No time needs to be wasted. There are advantages also in moving faster, which we will discuss in the next session. So with this, let me thank all the panelists, and we still have about 10 minutes left. So now I open the session to questions and answers. If those of you who would like to ask any question to any particular panelist, you're most welcome to do so. Kindly raise your hands and introduce yourself. Yes, sir. Kindly introduce yourself. I also mentioned the panelist who would
myself, Vinod Iyer. I am from RAS, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Service Sector Society. My question is, to still some companies are giving new buses with R22 gases, and average life of AC is 7 to 10 years. So still 2032, these gases will remain in environment. So how can we stop that machines to sell or anything else? This is my questions.
Yeah, I think of late, whatever we have seen, most of the companies have already come out of R22. And there are few companies which are still giving it. I think that's the situation is right now. But if you look at it day by day, it's not growing, it's coming down. And in fact, the companies who have moved to 410A have now moved to R32. The transition is 2 times ahead. So I don't think so that should be an alarming situation, but we all know from the HCFC point of view, recently I think we have released HPMP stage 3, wherein the focus is on 22, which has been a prime thing there. So It will go down as far as we know from the industry point of view. But yes, we do see that some of the equipments are still sold, particularly the small time split units with 22. So we hope that it gets faded away soon.
Yeah, probably a very small thing to add on here is, yes, the timelines for, is set by Ozone Cell under consultation with the industry, and RAS is very much involved with Ozone Cell, so probably the answers better, but still, when we talk of a refrigerant coming in an equipment, and that equipment will have certain life, but over a period of life, there are certain applications. Say, for example, if you're talking about the room air conditioner, there are retrofit options available. And people, even today, without the mandatory norm, there are a number of enterprises who are retrofitting their systems from R22 to alternatives. So that is also happening in India. And probably, I don't know if some of you are aware, people have started to evaluate retrofitting R134A based system to alternative. So that is also something which is started in India. So yeah, both things are there. So limited life and options, both are there. Yeah.
Anybody else? Repeat question?
No, another question. My other question is related to BE, that new such buildings are coming with full exposed glasses and take more capacity of air conditioning and HP power, and more gases are used. So how can we prevent that such things in India? They are using more glasses for aesthetic purpose or for saving cost of material, but they are using the green buildings are coming, but still some buildings are coming with exposed glasses. So more power will be used for that, and maximum capacity of AC also uses in these buildings.
Yeah, unfortunately there is no panelist who is in a better position, but Mr. Quatra has offered himself, so you're most welcome.
That's such an important point. And how do you reduce the demand for cooling, and therefore reduce the need for refrigerants? Partners, Nrdc and others are working on building efficiency as well. So what you're saying is such an important point. And it's the windows, the glass, the insulation, the shading, the elements of the building that determine to a large extent what the cooling needs would be. So while we continue working on the technological innovations on making cooling appliances and equipment more and more climate friendly, more efficient, better refrigerants, it is equally important to work on passive cooling, technologies such as better buildings, cool roofs. Just installing a simple reflective roof can help keep the indoor temperatures 3 to 5 degrees lower, and hence the need for cooling goes down. So that's such an important point that you're emphasizing. So thank you for that.
Just to add to Mr. Quatra, this is the point I was referring to in my intervention in the morning session, that when we are building the urban infrastructure, we need to look at the kind of structures that we are building. The green rating is obviously one of the possible ways in which we can do this. Unfortunately, the governments at the state level and the stakeholders at the state level, we have a federal country, so we can't force everything through regulation. It's important to build awareness and get them on board. And we will have to look at the possible options which can be exercised to actually get the states on board in this, whether in the terms of green rating or mandating some of the energy efficiency or better technologies in the kind of urban infrastructure that we are building. That's a very important challenge which you have pointed out. But in the kind of cities that we are building, the smart cities program itself, I have not seen any attention being given to the cooling requirements. And that's a challenge which is not only in terms of policy, but also in terms of actual options, technology options and capacity building. So we all need to be concerned about it. Okay, so we have 2 questions, and I think we'll call it a day after that. So first, the gentleman on the left.
Thank you. My name is Vivek from Drain, and I just would like to understand from you, sir, that are we only putting everything on the industry, whether the industry is ready or not, but are we looking at the other side, whether the market is ready or not? What are we thinking for the consumer, why the consumer or the buyer should go for the low GWP solution? Because obviously the new technology will have some commercial aspects with it. Unless we have some policies or something, some incentivization, so why the customer should go for it? Like Mr. Quatra mentioned, in US they have US EPA and the AIM. Similarly, are we looking some sort of strategy or the policy for India as well, so that the market can grow up? Actually, what we feel is the market is not ready. However, the industry is ready, but the market is not ready.
Okay, I don't think regulation is the answer, but I'll leave it to Mr. Singhal to answer this question.
Okay, so Vivek, thank you for this important question. So, you know, when we talk about newer technologies or newer options, so since I come from, I spent my very long years in refrigerant gas industry, and in the refrigerant gas industry, we have seen, the transition based on industry, when you're getting energy or, efficiency or, lower cost, any, business advantage along with the GWP or ODP gain, that transition happens like this. You don't wait for the phase out date or number, but whenever there is a penalty in terms of, even if it is a slight penalty in terms of business, so, and it is a purely a environmental transition, we have seen, in India, we have seen the transition happening on 31st December. So that happens, and probably, even in this scenario, when we are talking of HFC phase down, probably that is going to happen. So if we get energy or any other advantage in terms of transition, it is going to be very fast because, the market will be driving it. So for example, in chillers, now the chiller, if a chiller of 134A with efficiency and a chiller with low GWP refrigerant with the same efficiency, if they can compete. Because the refrigerant cost in a chiller is very small versus another application, say for example a foam. So if you have a foam where the blowing agent have a very big cost and you're competing with the energy efficiency. So these are 2 different sectors. So anywhere where there is an economic sense, it's transition very fast. And if there is a penalty in terms of business case, then the transition happens on the last date. And I know I've seen it, from R12 to 134A transition. I was in industry and I had to do 3, shifts, work in terms of transitioning OEM. So auto OEMs transitioning from 12 to 134A. So that happens, and probably that's going to happen with 22, and that's going to happen with HFC phase down as well. I foresee that. Yeah, sorry.
Sir.
I just wanted to add something for sharing information about this building efficiency. ISHRE is coming out with a standard on building performance efficiency. So I think that will take into consideration a lot many things. We have set up almost like a 100-member team which is developing this IIBEPS, as we call it, ISHRE India Building Energy Performance Standard. Thank you.
Yes, maybe the last question here.
Myself, Anand Shukla, I represent RMI India. And I would like to just respond to the question my colleague from Train has asked. So basically, customer doesn't have to, think about refrigerant or anything, because the customer, the only thing matters is the money.
And if we target the customer, let's say, from a builder perspective, so most of the buildings, they are, sold bare without air conditioners. And if you target the buildings where the air conditioners which are, fitted in the building before the customer moves in are 5-star, and whatever we want, I mean, that is something which we can control at the very beginning. And RMI has a building plan, and we are working together with LODA, and that is what exactly we are trying to do. And also, India, buildings are not insulated, and passive and cool roof are already mentioned. So basically, first thing is to reduce the energy requirement, and another thing is the government procurement has to move from 3-star to 5-star air conditioners. That has to happen immediately, because we always talk about star labeling, but then again the government departments end up buying 3-star air conditioners. It will also not help. So bulk procurement will definitely bring down the cost, and if it can bring down the cost for government and the, let's say, builders who are building new buildings, and so that is also will be complementing the penetration of efficient air conditioners. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. With this, we have come to the end of this session. Let me now thank our esteemed panelists once again for their contribution to this session, for generating discussion which is so meaningful and which has given us a lot of insight into how the market is behaving, how industry is responding to the challenge, and what are the challenges before us in the long run. So thank you very much, and thank you for being patient with us and for having listened to us so attentively. Thank you very much.
Before we move ahead with the second session, I would request Mr. R. Rashmi sir to present the mementos to our panelists. Yeah. I once again thank all the eminent panel for the session 1. Moving ahead with our next session, the title is Cooling with Less Warming Through Minimum Energy Performance Standards and Building Energy Codes. I request the panelists for this session to come up on the stage. We have Mr. Bipin Talati, Joint Secretary, Climate Change Department, Government of Gujarat, Mr. P.K. Mukherjee, Senior Advisor, CLAPS India, Mr. Gaurav Vetani, Rama, Mr. Srinivas Muturi, Senior General Manager, Voltas. Unfortunately, Ms. Divya has to leave for another engagement, and instead we have Mr. Rahul Agniotri from UNEP country office. I also would like to call upon the stage Dr. Satish Kumar, President and Executive Director, Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE. Before we move ahead with our panel discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Rohit Thakur, Research Associate, the Energy and Resources Institute, to come up on the stage and present a theme-setting presentation for all of you, and then we will move ahead with our discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Ria. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining in for the second thematic session. And the discussion will be based on the consequences of not having cooling and how to reduce cooling in first place through adopting minimum MEPS, minimum energy performance standards, and building energy codes. So consequences of climate change can be clearly witnessed through raising temperature and increasing heat wave intensity globally. And And recently in India, we have witnessed in the March, there is an intense heat wave, and in July 2022, in UK, United Kingdom, the temperature was recorded 40.3 degrees centigrade, which is the highest ever since the temperature of measurement of temperature initiated. So heat wave basically can affect the population even if shorter exposure of time, and they can cause basically the loss of productivity, wealth and health and well-being. So how to tackle heat waves? So to tackle heat waves, cooling is the top driver, and means we cannot just consider cooling as a means luxury or for comfort, but again cooling is associated with economic growth, and it can be directly linked with the means productivity and health-being of the occupants. So means recently a study conducted by Sustainable Energy for All, in which they have reported that India has roughly 32 crores population. They have lack of access of cooling, which is a scary number, 32.2 crores. And this poses a serious threat on the those 32.2 crores lives. So moving ahead means cooling can also be linked with sustainable development goals. So cooling is a make or break choice for sustainable development goals and environments. And access to sustainable cooling can support to provide good health and well-being, sustainable cities and communities make more resilience. In some settings, Sustainable Development Goal 7, which is affordable and clean energy, is also required for specifically in particularly for rural areas where electricity is not provided reliably. So these are some SDG goals which are directly linked with coolings. So we have challenges. So in terms of challenges, India's challenge to address cooling is different from the rest of the world because of its diversity in climatic and climatic conditions. So we have communities living in urban slum dwellers units where they have no access of cooling, and at the same time our middle income group aspiration is raising, and there are chances that they might opt for the low efficient appliances, which again is going to impact our energy consumption and going to increase our carbon emission intensity. And as per the Indian Cooling Action Plan, in 2019, only 8% of households have a room air conditioner, which is set to increase by 21% and 40% in 2027 and 28 and 2037 and 38 respectively. So means these are some challenges are there, and we have a solution as well. So in terms of solution, since we are like most of the buildings are yet to be built in our country, so we can use standards and codes which are already published by Bureau of Energy Efficiency as the design measures, and we can reduce the cooling demand of those buildings by using proper strategy, and later on we can use the energy efficient technologies to further reduce the energy consumption. There are two codes launched by Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Energy Conservation Building Code for commercial and Eco-Niwas Samhita for residential, which set the minimum energy performance standards, so that they can the occupant can thermally feel to meet the thermal comfort and adequate daylighting and other parameters using passive strategy. So the solution is more based on the passive strategy part. So what is standing in the way? So basically there are lack of there are still lack of awareness by among the end user how we can by improving the energy efficiency, how we can reduce the consumption of electricity, and this is the reason the financial drivers are not in place, and one of the obstacle can be considered as the market should be driven by the end user. Until unless the market should not be driven by the end user, the cost of the upfront cost of investment will be always on the higher part. And on ECBC and ENS, the codes were first launched back in 2007, but still only 55% of the states have notified the codes. Out of 36 states and UTs, 20 states and UTs have 20 states and UTs have notified these codes. So there are still challenges to adopt these codes, and we should also consider developing not only for the states and at the central level. We should also consider the regulatory and mechanism should be developed at the local level, so that it can be so that the ECBC code and ENS should be easily integrated and enforced at the local level, because they are the one who are going to enforce the code in daily practices. So that's it from my end, and I would love to hear from our esteemed panelists. So over to you, sir.
रोहित जी, आपने ही सारी बात कर ली, अब हम लोग क्या बात करेंगे? चलिए, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank TERI, the SHEETAL project, and Nrdc for giving this opportunity. And what I'm thinking that there is no presentation, so we will try to keep it interesting through some Q&A. So hopefully we will have some fun doing this, and also we will get to some serious discussions. So first of all, I was looking forward to, I think these are some situations where I thought Saurabh Didi will be here and we will be able to grill him a little bit, but he looks like he escaped, giving the excuse of, I know that there is a very serious Energy Conservation Act amendment that is being discussed in Lok Sabha. So that's, we are all looking forward to seeing, I think, how and in what form that will get passed, because looks like it's really a futuristic looking amendments. I was going through some of the amendment clauses that are getting discussed today. So we are all, I think, excited about it, and I know that probably that's much more important than coming here and participating in this discussion. Also, Rahul ji, you are in the hot seat. Divya ji, I think who was initially slated, she's not here. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start. I think there is a lot of discussion about code. There is a lot of discussion about passive cooling. There's a lot of discussion about appliances standards and chillers and what businesses are doing on that aspect. So let me ask you this question, and I think we will come back to, I think this is not the only question I'm going to be asking you, but I think my first question is that UNEP as an entity is, the way I look at it, and probably many people in the room look at UNEP, I think UNEP is an ecosystem enabling entity. UNEP is also part of the United Nations program, has a central role in the Montreal Protocol, Kigali Agreement. It's also a coalition builder. I think the Cool Coalition, UNEP is playing a very, very important role there. It is also very active in a couple of areas like cold chain and district cooling. You have programs. We are working together on some of these programs as well. And UNEP is also, I mean, I was in Bihar. We have a pretty ambitious program. Bihar has expressed its desire to be a net zero economy even before the Panchamrit came about. So there is a pretty serious work going on. UNEP is part of that. Shakti is part of that. So my question to you is that, what is UNEP? I mean, how do you see the role of UNEP? Because I think UNEP wears many flags, and especially in the area of like cooling and refrigeration. which is emerging as a very, very important. So what do you think, how do you define UNEP? And maybe I think you can share some of your perspectives in terms of, I think, responding to some of these different hats that UNEP wears.
Thank you, Satish ji.
ये ले लीजिए.
Thank you, Satish ji, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank NRDC and TERI for inviting UNEP for this very important session. Yeah. I am Rahul Agnihotri. I work in cities unit of UNEP from New Delhi office. We are majorly, I come from Energy and Climate branch, but I majorly work in cooling sector and supporting the implementation of National Cooling Action Plan here in India. And there are certain global programs across the world where India is also a part of this global program. So I am supporting the implementation of these global programs in India. Like Satish ji first asked me the question that what is UNEP? So to be very candid and frank, UNEP is a policy advocacy organization promoting training and capacity building, promoting projects focusing on environment, clean energy, and air pollution. In India, primarily, we have been working on these sectors. And UNEP has a role towards supporting Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, which is our nodal ministry for all our programs. So we work very closely with Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change. But as we are working in cooling, so it cross-cuts across various sectors. So we are also working with Ministry of Power, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Ministry of Agriculture, and also with the Ministry of Environment and Forest. So there are a couple of cooling projects that we are doing globally, and we are trying to use them to support the Indian government to take actions on sustainable cooling, as well as to reduce the use of refrigerant in air conditioning. So as Satish sir mentioned, UNEP hosts the Global Secretariat for Cool Coalition, and it has more than 100 plus members. So it has more than 100 plus members, and most of these members are also coming from India, and I'm happy to say that some of the members are sitting here in the room, including AEEE, Satish ji. Then there are members from RMI, there is member, ISHRE is there, Danfoss, who has been supporting Cool Coalition and working closely with us, is here. So Cool Coalition is something which is providing a platform to all the industry players, association, research organizations to come together and advance actions on sustainable cooling. Cool Coalition has also joined forces with Ozone Secretariat, Ozone Action, Food and Agriculture Organization, and we are jointly promoting different programs focusing on space cooling, cold chain. Like Satish sir mentioned, there is a global program on space cooling, which is in India, we are implementing it for India Cooling Program, which we called it as India Cooling Program. And the program is more actually focusing on three aspects. One is how the cities can be made more greener, how the cities policies and master plans can be influenced so that cooling is considered right at design stage, so that the urban heat island effect is reduced in the city when a lot of building construction comes into play and urban transportation comes into play. So cooling takes care of all these aspects. Then the second area is like we are focusing on buildings where the focus is on active cooling and passive cooling. On active cooling, we have been promoting projects like super efficient air conditioning deployment program with ESL, We have been working on district energy in cities initiative where district cooling was one of the focus project. Then on passive cooling, we have now started working with some of the government to support them on implementation of energy conservation building codes and to integrate passive cooling into the designs for social housing sector. So with this, I will stop, and I'm sure I'll get more time to elaborate on what we are doing. Thank you, Satish.
Thank you, Rahul, for I think describing what UNEP is, because UNEP wears multiple hats, as we know, and also I think how UNEP is working, especially in advancing the sustainable cooling agenda in India. So thanks for that. I'll come back to you with some more specific questions. I'm moving on to Mr. P.K. Mukherjee. I think he is a stalwart in the area of standards and labeling, and he has of course worked at Bureau of Indian Standards and is currently working with CLASP and leading their standards and labeling program. There is one official piece that I have been asked to pose to you, and then I will add one interesting piece as well, so that I think I can get your input. So in the context of like India's, like whether we are calling India Cooling Action Plan or Sustainable Cooling Agenda Journey, clearly the two standards I think that CLASP has helped facilitate. One is the room air conditioner, and that's like the lightning rod, everyone wants to talk about it. And there are reasons, because I think that's the segment that is likely to grow significantly over the next 15-20 years. And the refrigerator, which is also, I think, is a part of cold chain the way I look at it, because I think if you are looking from a farm to fork kind of construct, then it's there. So while I would like to probably hear from you in terms of what has been the journey, but more like future looking, how you are seeing how some of the refrigerant related aspects are going to be brought. We are looking at eco-labeling aspect. But I would also like you to perhaps address a second point, which I will come back in the second time when I come to you. So for this round, maybe I think in the next 5 minutes or so, Mukherjee Sahab, if you can just talk on the room air conditioner and refrigerators and how that is going to play a significant role. So over to you.
Thank you, Satishji. And at the outset, I should also express my sincere thanks to TERI and Nrdc for extending an invitation to attend this workshop. And Satishji, I think there is a very interesting questions. And let me tell you the journey from the air conditioners. It all started in 2006. And you can see the transformation on the RAC sector, how it happened. And almost 6 times the standard was revised by Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And today, I think if we compare the level of other countries, still India level is much, much better. And the standard in BIS, which is a 1391, is the Bible of the room air conditioner standards in two parts. One deals with the window and with the split AC. This standard was revised twice, and the recent revision has been taken place just in order to address some of the areas like the sound level, the refrigerant part, and the refrigerants that the earlier speaker, Madam Khushbu, has mentioned about the refrigerant standard, the ISO standard. So those have also been incorporated in that. But the future plan is that IEC, there is a safety standard, IEC 60335-2-40, and I think BIS Technical Committee was trying hard to bring that standard integrated into IS 1391 RAC standard. But there are certain concerns raised by the manufacturer, particularly the charge quantity and the safety factors, particularly the A3 refrigerants. So somehow that it was not accepted by the committee, and we are struggling. And the study was conducted by IIT recently, as Madam Khushbu has explained. So now I think we have got some clue that in what way we can address that flammable refrigerant in BIS standards. And the good part is that recently in May 2022, IEC has revised the standard, and the standard is there. It is a very, very robust, very, very comprehensive standards. And though it's a very long standard, it runs into 155 pages. But there are requirements like, how to deal with the flammable refrigerants. There is a separate annexure G. And also there are certain tests which talks about the abnormality. Abnormality means if the air conditioner malfunctions, or some of the components, it does not work while the air conditioner is in operation, how to deal with that. So, that standard is so comprehensive, I'm sure that the BIS technical committee and the manufacturers in particular will sit together and will discuss on the standards, and this is the right time that BIS committee and the manufacturer also took a serious note of that standard and try to put it in the BIS, IS 1391, the RAC standard, so that there is an ample opportunity for the manufacturers to get, themselves, prepared that how to address that, the low and the low flame, high and flammable refrigerant, but very, very climate-friendly refrigerant into the product. So I think so that, as I think some earlier speakers has told about the early phase out, yes, we have some commitment, but yes, still we can do that, phase out much earlier if we start preparing that. So my, submission to the, the manufacturers and to the BIS committee, because I am also very much an active member of BIS committee, that let us as fast as possible adapt the IEC 60335-2, the 40 standards in the IS 1391 RSC standards. So I think there is an ample scope. Another area where class has supported that to build or to include eco-leveling criteria in RSC standards. So if I say about the eco-mark criteria, BIS is the implementing authority for eco-marking, but the criteria has to be developed by CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board. And the class has helped in preparing the eco-mark criteria, and it has been submitted to BIS, and I think BIS have already submitted to CPCB. So these eco-mark criteria will cover the environmental clearance, which is mandatory, hazardous substances management, noise pollution not coming out from the air conditioners, but whichever industry are producing that, the equipment or the product, the entire, the noise limit, which is emanated from the industries, that should meet that noise pollution criteria. Ozone depletion, the manufacturer should not use a material which has no ozone depletion characteristics, properties. And also the EMS certification, environmental management system certification, that is a must. And then noise level of the product. And BIS standard, if you refer, it talks about the noise level, energy consumption limit, and recycling of the components. The eco-mark criteria says that almost 80%, about 80% of the components or the material which are used in the manufacturing of the product, it should have the recycling components. And the painting and packaging should be environmental friendly. So this is all about the RSC, but the major development in the refrigeration sector is that there is to be two separate standards on direct cool and frost-free. These two standards have been merged, and BE is going to revise they are revising the labeling standard, and intention was to have a single rating program for both DC refrigerator and frost-free refrigerator, but there is some representation from certain sectors of the industry that right now it is not possible to have a common rating plan for direct cool and frost-free, because most of the direct cool might qualify for the higher level, whereas for the frost-free, it might not qualify for the higher level. So discussion is still on, but the good news is that both the standards have been clubbed, and it talks about not only the daily and annual energy consumption, but also it talks about the total energy consumption, which takes into account the other auxiliaries, and also the recovery efficiency or the load factor efficiency or the defrost cycle efficiency. So the new standard definitely takes into care of the various features which are built into the new refrigerator technology. So Satish, I think this is briefly all about the refrigerator and air conditioner standards which BIS has worked, and also the B leveling program, how it has progressed from 2006 to 2020-22. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. Thank you for a very good overview. I will have a follow-up question on the refrigerator and the other question, but I'll come to you. So I'm moving to Gauravji. Gaurav is a Deputy General Manager at Daikin, but I'm assuming you are wearing Rama hat today, Gaurav. Yes. So my question is going to be, I think, related to Rama, and especially, I think, Rama being the kind of industry association of refrigerator and air conditioning manufacturers. Its role becomes quite central, and we, of course, Rama played a pretty important role in development of ICAP as well. But more recently, there is a lot of excitement and buzz around the Make in India, and what the government and the industry has been able to do with the help of incentives like PLI and other things, which is on one hand trying to make India into an export hub, and on the other hand it's also helping businesses expand their capacity, I think, with more efficient appliances. So I think if that is something that I think if we keep hearing, and I would like to hear your thoughts, I think, in terms of what is, how Rama wants to go beyond this, because I think this thing is in play right now, and many companies are participating in this. I know that in our discussions, Gaurav, there has also been one area that has been discussed, which is that how should India develop like a plan for scrapping old refrigerator, old sort of like air conditioners and others, and probably because there is an expectation that once you phase out one generation of room air conditioners, I mean, there could be, I think, efficiency gains of easily 25–30% that you can have with the phase out of the older refrigerator and installing of the new ones. So I would like to think that, I think, what is Rama's views on that? I think what are some of the discussions that are happening, because that looks like another big opportunity to improve the stock efficiency, I think, at a country level. So if you can address these two topics, I think that would be great, Gaurav.
Sure. Thank you, Satish ji. So as far as Rama is concerned, since the workshop is talking on maximizing the benefits for climate-friendly cooling through successful implementation of the Kigali Amendment, let me put forward that Rama has welcomed the Kigali Amendment very much, as India does. And as far as Kigali is concerned, India is going to complete its phase down by 2047. Of course, that will happen in 4 transitions. 2032, there will be 10%, and then 10% in 2037 and 42 respectively. As you rightly pointed out, Indian AC industry, and in particularly Rama, has always in the forefront of all the initiative, whether it is related to environment, energy efficiency, or PLI. And we've always supported the actions to prevent ozone depletion and global warming. And our industry motto is comfort for people and care for planet. We are also not talking about cooling, we are talking about giving comfort conditions to users. And as far as PLI is concerned, significant investment is actually being made, not only on the product side or FG side, but also on the component side, because we were facing challenges earlier on the raw materials, primarily copper, aluminum, controllers. So industry has done a lot of efforts under PLI to maximize its benefit and do some investments in India on these components particularly. And as we know that BE has ratcheted up their standards beginning 2010, but if I talk about the current situation, almost 50% of energy efficiency is being ratcheted up by BE, and manufacturers have always been supportive to that. Not only to that extent, right now, just last month, BE ratcheted up their standards, and we are operating at 5-star or 5 ICR. Now, there are products with couple of manufacturers which are more than 6 ICR. So already you can see 25% ratcheting up already happening with just last month, transition, which will continue till December 24. So that's a very important point where industry is ready. But as Vivek rightly mentioned, some of the users are not ready because they are not going to invest on the new technologies. So what is the way forward? Probably I'm going to touch upon that in my upcoming points. And competitions like Global Cooling Prize, where you were also deeply involved, India has demonstrated a huge success. And being an Indian, I'm actually very proud that out of more than 100 countries and 2,000 participants, India won the Global Cooling Prize. And with this technology, we have demonstrated that there is a possibility to further accelerate the ICR levels, where the demonstration was given at 7.3 ICR, which is further 46% higher than we are operating currently at this point in time. I'm sorry. And one of the important points which I think our President and CMD Daikin also pointed out is the replacement. So I believe the users are probably not ready on the new innovations, but definitely they are ready on the existing innovations because they are using old air conditioners which are probably 10 to 12 years old. So what is the way out? Industry has come forward, put a proposal to BE, and we are very fortunate that BE has endorsed. The DG was very supportive, Shri Abhay Bakre, in that particular proposal that industry has put forward on the replacement of inefficient air conditioners with super efficient ones. This will be a win-win situation if we are able to transform the market. This will result in avoiding generation of new power plants. This will generate additional revenue in terms of GST for the Government of India. This will also generate e-waste, which will help us in meeting the sustainability targets for Government of India. This will be generating employment for the technicians who are going to, repair or install these ACs. And above all, this is going to meet the ICAP targets. In fact, I believe this is going to overachieve the ICAP targets what we have taken as far as growth is concerned. And above all, it is going to save electricity, and it is also going to generate some carbon credits which will go into government's pocket. So it's a win-win situation for all of us. And I believe, apart from this, industry is also doing a couple of efforts, not only on the product side, but also on the building management system side, which can, further save energy efficiency with the existing set of products. So our study says that probably 20 to 25% of energy efficiency can be saved or conserved with building management system. And my last point, which Mr. Rashmi also pointed out, is there is a need of decarbonization, how we can do that. Still, we are seeing that many users are using OFRs, oil-filled radiators, or electric geysers, which consume as high as 3,000 watts. In fact, if they are able to transition or shift to air conditioning with heat pump technology, they can, be benefited out of it. So there are air conditioning technology available with heat pump, though the market proportion is not less, is actually very less, but it is going to be increased right now from 2% to 5% in the coming years. So I think we can look at these technologies as far as decarbonization is concerned, and as far as overall CO2 emission reduction is being concerned, which can, focus on sustainability. So as far as Rama is concerned, I think all these points are well poised to achieve, and contribution from industry side on the sustainability targets, which can very well meet the Kigali Amendment, which is going to take place from 32 onwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav, for giving an overview of, I think, all the initiatives that Rama has been part of and the leadership that it is showing.
I'll come to Mr. Muturi. He's the Senior General Manager of R&D at Voltas. And today he is wearing the hat of CMA. And so again, I think in the spirit of easy questions, I think I will give you the floor and maybe request that how do you see SIAMA and maybe I think even Voltas, the work that you are doing, more on the refrigeration side, because we are here, I mean, we know HVAC and R is a pretty big component of, I think when we talk about HVAC industry. And we are also seeing that refrigeration is playing a pretty important role. I mean, we are involved in cold chain and some other areas, which has certainly, I think, come up in a big way over the last, I think, 3-4 years ever since the publication of ICAP as well. So if you can perhaps, I think, enlighten us a little bit about what is happening in the refrigeration industry, what kind of technology, I think, innovation, and what SIAMA is also looking to do, and what it is, I think, how it is working with the government, that would be great.
Sure.
Over to you.
Thank you, Satish ji. So briefly, I'm just telling about SIAMA. SIAMA is, Consumer Electronics Appliance Manufacturer Association. We are about 150 manufacturers. Our members are in that. And most of the room air conditioner and almost all refrigerator manufacturers, component manufacturer, color television manufacturer, and as well as small appliance manufacturer are members. Also the components, manufacturers. So there are a lot of deliberations on various aspects, including the products, manufacturing, and ecosystem, as well as various policies in the SIAMA forums. One of the major contributions towards the refrigerators. The refrigerators, almost 100% manufacturer members in SIAMA, where we deliberate a lot of, on the standards, as Mukherjee-san explained. So a lot of deliberation when it is merging up, the earlier standard to new standard. So there are a lot of issues with respect to the manufacturer, which is deliberated and successfully, solved those problems. Coming to other activities, like SIAMA is very much involved in the e-waste and plastic waste regulations, which is properly implemented with the manufacturers, and a lot of deliberations has been taking place, and we give input to the ministries so that proper policy can be made so that successfully implemented. So that is also in the roadmap. So coming to refrigeration, refrigeration is one of the biggest segment. It is almost not equivalent, but it is nearly growing up very fast. If I say refrigeration industry, the two major segments, one is the domestic refrigeration and another is the commercial refrigeration. The domestic refrigeration, basically the household refrigerators, almost the products are at par with the international standards, as well as the products are being implemented, the hydrocarbon refrigerants. It has been shifted from R12 to R134A and R134A2 shifted to R600. Now 100%, I believe, in the refrigerator segment has been shifted to R600, which is very low GWP as well as zero ODP gas. That is one part very successfully implemented. Another part is coming to commercial refrigeration. Commercial refrigeration is come to limelight when it started discussion on the basis of ICAP, when ICAP is one of the subject is the refrigeration. So interestingly, from the ICAP, it took one product, it is coming that, one of the biggest product, the deep freezers, with the deep freezers becoming a standard, and it comes to MEPS. Then suddenly it comes to limelight, yes, because ICAP report more are focusing on, space cooling, but refrigeration segment is touched upon. And further, when it comes to MEPS, for starting with the deep freezers, the industry woke up and start looking at the standard, and we got so many issues. When standard is there, but it's not mandatory, when it becomes mandatory, then again the standard become revision, because the standard when it's formed, maybe way back around 15-20 years, there are a lot of changes in the technologies which is happening and incorporated that need to be updated in the standard, which has been done, and successfully from Jan 2023, the ratings, MEPS regulation will be applicable for the deep freezers. That is, I think, starting point in a refrigeration and a next step. In the refrigeration products, commercial refrigeration products, there is various products. It's a very numerous products. I can divide in 3 segments. One is the unitary products, that is the boxes like what is the deep freezers, BC coolers, the bottle coolers, etc. And second is the cold chain. Cold chain means starting from farm to the store. There are various levels. The cold store and the transport refrigeration and the end use product, end use storage equipments. And then third one is the commercial, industrial refrigeration, which is again very neglected, or it is still, very backstage at this point of moment. I think, because it is almost in the industrial refrigeration side, where it goes to, whether it goes to food processing, whether it goes to your fertilizers manufacturing, or milk chilling plants, or marine industry. So there are a lot of areas. There is a refrigeration, packages, refrigeration chillers will be applicable, which is another focus area. Maybe that is also growing at rate. So if you see the growth of these segments, how it is being happening, the domestic refrigeration, of course, 8 to 10% is growing, and it is ahead of air conditioning, room air conditioning, but refrigerator segment is around 10 to 15% penetration level. It is faster growing. And coming to commercial refrigeration, where the first is that box products, that is freezers and all, it is about going to 10 to 15% in a year. And fortunately this year, if you see because of the heat wave, the commercial product, refrigeration products has been grown by more than 100% over 2019. That is the growth what is happening now, because the lot of awareness in the products, and the FCCA regulation has been put up, standard norms that how to keep the product, what kind of temperature it should be kept, and also maturity of the product, etc., the validity of the products. So the storekeepers are being kept to cold, particular. That is one of the revolution it is coming up. That is one area. And another thing is that in the cold chain, this is also part of ICAP, where in the cold chain, lot of discussion is happening. Basically, first and fourth point is the operations of the cold chain. It is very, very, you can say it is very, very less knowledge specific at the end user level. The way of cold chain, the cold store operations. So there are now the BIS panel has been discussing about the standard revision from based on the international standards, based on the current usage, what to be done, what kind of refrigerant to be used, how to manage those cold rooms. I think that will be helpful for the industry to actually implement. Somebody has to see that cold chain industry, basically, it is not with very well organized sector. It is organized and unorganized sector mix up, where the cold chain is, the cold rooms have been installed at the site level. So there is lot of requirement of the standard guidelines should be mentioned. That is under process. Hopefully with the deliberations we can able to get it very strong recommendations and the guidelines which can be used for benchmark to the industry. That I think one of the best point. I would like to say that. So that's all. I think I got it all the points as you asked.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maturi. I'm just cognizant of the time. What I'll do is I'll go through like maybe a rapid fire round. I'll by asking some very specific questions, and I'll request I think the esteemed panelists to be very brief, because I do want to take some questions from the audience which has been sitting patiently as well. So I will start with Mr. Mukherjee this time. So Mr. Mukherjee, you talked about the 50% kind of like room air conditioner efficiency over a period of like 10 to 12 years that India has experienced. When we talk about fans, 50% efficiency is possible right now. How much time do you think India will take for fan efficiency to achieve, I think, where we are, to 50% efficiency that is possible? I mean, you have lived your life, I think, in this sector, but also understanding the political economy side of things, I think we know that fan standards do get impacted. So 30-second response.
maybe a couple of minutes more. I think, Mr. Satishji, thank you very much. But you know me very well, and many of audience also knows me very well. But let me tell you that I'm from class, but let me say a few words about my organization. We are a not-for-profit organizations headquartered in Washington, D.C. We have our presence in China, Europe, Indonesia, Kenya, and of course in India. In India, we are supporting Bureau of Energy Efficiency. See, always whenever I start talking Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Bureau of Indian Standards immediately, comes from my mouth because I had a long association of 30 years in BIS. So anyway, we are providing technical support to Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Prior to 2000, I think, almost 1.5 decade. And we are working and supporting BE in many areas. So air conditioning, refrigeration is the core area. And coming to, sir, your question, yes, I think the fan standard, if you see the IS 374, it was published somewhere in late 50s. And whatever the value was prescribed that point of time, I am just giving you a reference of, say, 1200 mm fan, which is most common. 4 was the service value. And even today, the same service value we are using. Now, what happened? When B started, this labeling program, somehow they started with the 3.2 value, which was much, much lower. So, BS standard was talking about 4. I'm just giving you one size because there are many sizes. So, with the 4 as a service value, but there was no possibility of reducing this value. What happened? If you want to just reduce this value, power consumption used to go high, and the air delivery was going to be, compromised. So I remember that CPWD Director General, he used to be our chairman of that committee, he used to say, Mr. Mukherjee, we are preparing standard, I am the chairperson, but when I place some order CPWD through DGSND, my fan does not give air, so why you are talking about 210 or 200 cubic meter? So let us increase it. So the question is that there are some 3 boundary lines in the Indian standard. One was the power, service value, and the air delivery. It was not possible to achieve all the 3. So what happened? We said, okay, let us forget about power, because power is somehow addressed. Whatever power manufacturer wants to declare, but he has to meet the service value. So that is how the journey started. And what happened? Commercially, whatever the fans were being sold in the market, people used to say it's 70 watts. So I used to say, why 70 watts? Standards is 50, but that was the market. But because of the BE's labeling program, and what happened, that suddenly there was a drastic change. BLDC fan started coming. BLDC fan, not today. It all started almost 10 years before. But there was a very, very low penetration. Now, when the BE was going to revise this labeling program, and they were going to put it as a mandatory, then only 2 manufacturers are there who are manufacturing BLDC fan. And people were claiming that time that yes, we can produce a fan up to even 40 watts also. Yeah, plus. So today the fans, BLDC fans are available at 28 watts. So my point is that there's a drastic change in the fan. And today B is going to also develop the policies for the table fan and ceiling fan, pedestal fan. There are many other fans are there in the market, which B will be taken up in future also. Sir, sorry for the positive time, because fan is a very tempting subject, and all of us might be using more time.
आपने मेरे क्वेश्चन का लेकिन जवाब नहीं दिया जो मैंने क्वेश्चन पूछा था. पर चलिए, I think we will take it offline. So I think I'll come to both Gaurav and Mr. Maturi. So Gaurav, you mentioned about I think this global cooling price, which has shown what is possible, I think, in terms of hybridization of the technology. If you combine evaporative cooling with refrigerant-based air conditioning technology. So that's, I think, on one side of things. The second side is that more and more people are asking for feedback from their appliances in terms of how much cooling is getting delivered, how much energy it is consuming. And then we have programs like demand response programs, where people are looking at grid interactive buildings and how appliances can actually start to participate in these demand response programs. So this is not per se, I think, what is the technology behind. We are really trying to look at that what are some innovations that manufacturers can do. And Maturiji, I will request you also, because you talked about refrigerators and deep freezers and others, that gives the feedback to the consumers, and which also creates a level playing field amongst, I think, the manufacturers, that how their product is performing. So it's a much more simpler way of looking at things, and there are smart plugs and other things which are already people are deploying. But can some of these technologies be, I think, incorporated as part of the design itself, I think, of some of these room air conditioners and refrigerators and others? And can we see, I think, some innovation happening which will start to address, I think, what consumers are asking, and what utilities and demand response programs are also, I think, requesting if they can see, I think, from a measurement and verification perspective. So quickly, I think, if both of you can address these things, and maybe take a minute or two, no more than that, because we want to get
Sure. So Satishji, let me compliment you. Very, very valid question at this point in time. So let me quickly answer, because I will not take more than 1 minute. So let me tell you that manufacturers are ready. If I talk about my own organization and couple of other organizations also, there are a couple of features which are incorporated in the unit itself, because how much I can tell you that inverters are efficient, nobody is going to believe unless you see it. Right. Hence, you know, we have incorporated couple of features in the display itself. When my AC run at part loads and run at lower RPM, my unit consumes only 20% of total efficiency. Yeah. Okay. The annual power consumption that is being declared currently at the 5-star level is about 900 units. So imagine consuming only 180 units per year. So that's an innovation that a couple of manufacturers, including Daikin, has done in the room AC category. Talking about further on room AC, now we are working on gathering consumer behavior, and that's why I said in the beginning, BMS plays an important role. So with the help of AI and IoT, now users can set their comfort temperature, do scheduling, monitoring, setback operation, and believe you me, this can save 20 to 25% of energy efficiency. But the problem is awareness to consumers. Of course, manufacturers are doing their own effort to do that, but I strongly advocate here that government should also intervene. And this is also being done in the commercial air conditioning, especially on the VRV and chiller side also, where we can do artificial intelligence, do set point monitoring and control, and also capture the consumer behavior, which can be integrated to demand response technologies at a later stage.
Thank you.
So that's the answer to your question.
Montreal,
Thanks a lot.
Maybe I think one question quickly to you is that you talked about the success story of R600. And we know that I think the inflammability of refrigerant is an issue. I think Mr. Mukherjee talked about it, and industry has been grappling with that. So do you think, I mean, how refrigerator industry, I think he went to R600, which is again an inflammable material, and I know that the design is a little bit different and all that, but what can the lessons be learned or derived from that, which will allow us to actually adopt some of these more efficient refrigerants as part of the design?
Yeah, thank you, Satishji. Quickly, in case of refrigerators and the refrigeration products, the refrigerant quantity being used, it is a par less than air conditioner. It is maximum to up to 150 grams at par. In case of refrigerator, it is less than 100 grams. However, even less than 100 grams, there is a safety issue, because the refrigerator normally kept in most of the refrigerator in a kitchen or in a house where the flame, the risk is high. So the refrigerator, the manufacturer widely, in-depth designed such a way that, first of all, meeting the IEC standards that is already adopted with the Indian standard. IEC is very stringent norms to the refrigerator product construction itself. So the manufacturer been adopted. and even various simulation conditions. Of course, during manufacturing, a lot of things have been benchmarked, how it will be, safeguard, even at a fire occurrence or anything. So those points have been incorporated at the product level. Not only at product level, during the product transportation, how the warehouses should be kept, away from the risk, and also at the end user point. So there are a lot of training and the infrastructure built at a warehouse level. For example, a warehouse case where warehouse has been built with the sensors. If it has any leakage happens, any fire accident, it automatically switch off those, the electrical these things. Such kind of safety has been incorporated. As well as coming to end user level, lot of trainings to the technicians. For example, there is a gas leak. How to refill the gas at the service level. That is very, very important task. Even for not only in case of refrigerator, that small charge, but in case of air conditioner R32, even it is a mildly flammable, the refrigerant charging process itself, lot of training skill upgradation has been done. I think that is ongoing process. However, that is, I think that is one of the lessons which has been learned from the refrigerator are been incorporated wherever the flammable refrigerant has been, implementing. That is, I think one of the part. Of course, the highly A3 refrigerant, the standard again has been under revision. Lot of deliberations are been considering India point of view, because this IEC standard has been built upon in Europe and US, where the developed nations, when the economy is developed, the consumers are aware, education level high, and maybe they can able to understand the technology and able to implement. But here in India, the actual usage practice, the service level, it's a big gap between the technology versus the end user point. So that's where we are debating and discussing. Even IIT Delhi has been made an almost big report on based on how to use this refrigerant, successfully. Now we are deliberating how to incorporate the safety, points in the product, because that is where the deliberations are occurring. I hope in coming days we will come across, those, things in a successful way. We can able to see that also.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And Rahul, last question to you before we open it up. I think you described the role of UNEP and some of the things that it is doing. What, in your opinion, what are the areas or what are some of the examples where you think UNEP has an opportunity to showcase India's leadership? I know that ICAP was one such example, and we participated on the NCAP methodology. But since UNEP works very actively in India, and also I think around the world, can you specify like maybe a couple of examples which you think that, I think the work that is getting done in India has a larger, I think, a global implication or South-South collaboration, and I think those kind of ramifications. So can you give us a quick, maybe a couple of examples in the next 1 or 2 minutes before we open up?
Yeah, thank you, Satish ji. What I understand is our MEP program, Minimum Efficiency Standards Program and Standard and Labeling Program, particularly focusing on air conditioning, is going pretty well, and the benchmarks are being revised every 2 years, 3 years. So I think that is something which we can take under South-South cooperation to the African countries where these things have now started. So maybe learning from India's experience would be very handy for them to do not reinvent the wheels. Second thing is, when we started off energy efficiency in industries, and the PAT scheme was quite successful in India as compared to the other countries where that success was not that high as it got in India. So maybe something like PAT mechanisms can be promoted.
Okay.
Then
maybe
regional
in cooling area, maybe.
Yeah. So in cooling area, maybe the regional level, maybe we can establish a sustainable procurement system for efficient appliances, including air conditioners and fans. So that can also be very useful for the entire region to follow one standard for cooling equipments, and it becomes very easier to adopt the efficiency levels in every country in one go.
Harmonization of
Harmonization
the
of standards.
standard
Yeah.
has been a long-standing topic. I don't know, so you are, I think, raking up that issue again. I think it's easier said than done, we know that.
Yeah.
So, but thank
but
you.
Sustainable
yeah,
procurement is something
sure.
at public level is something which
I definitely think that energy efficient procurement, I think it can piggyback on the standards and labeling program. And we are also in discussions with some of the ministries that some of the plug and play technologies, I mean, whether it's fans, whether it's room air conditioners, I mean, they can be so quickly incorporated into the procurement process. So I think, I agree, it will help create a market. So thank you everybody. I do want to take, I think, some questions from the floor. So I think anybody who has any questions, please keep the questions brief, introduce yourself, and then if you can direct the questions to the specific panelist as well.
Hi everyone, this is Kishore from CLASP. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists for being here and sharing your insightful thoughts on the cooling sector and refrigerants and appliances. So my question is a little bit different, which unconventional I would say. First thing is, like, in India, we have efficiency policies. We have very strong industry which supports the efficiency policies. And energy efficiency, if you see, has been transformed in the cooling in air conditioning especially. But at the consumer end, if you see, the penetration of a room air conditioner is less than 10%. And with a population of which is such a huge size, in the future, we all know, like, as per the ICAP, the cooling load going to increase, and room air conditioner one of the biggest segment, and the demand going to be very high. So what kind of role should play by the government or by the industry or by civil societies to make room air conditioner accessible, affordable to the consumers, so that, we actually have a better control on the growing cooling demand and also on the growing energy in the cooling segment. The reason I'm worried, because if you see the China, though it's a developing country, the room air conditioner penetration approximately 60%. But in India, we are very, very far behind. So I just want to hear from you guys, like, what kind of actions or steps we should take at the India level so that we can handle this cooling load rising demand in a better way, rather than struggling after a couple of years, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kishore. Hold on. I think let me take a couple of more questions, and then we can probably...
Sure.
Okay,
Thanks.
Kapil ji, I think
Yeah, I'm Kapil Singha from BP Refcool, and I have two small quick questions from Mukherjee sir. One about the safety standard about the room air conditioners. So I'm pretty sure we are adopting, and we are doing the due consideration from Indian application perspective, but probably I still feel coming from a refrigerant background, we need to evaluate if there is a stabilizer which is still used in some of the rooms, which is installed just under just below the indoor unit. Second thing, probably we need to also consider, and this is my personal experience, is the ironing. In my bedroom, my wife does ironing sometimes, and it is just below the the indoor of the air conditioner. So probably these are some of the areas where I personally, knowing refrigerant flammabilities and all, is concerned. So probably there is due work which is going on. So that was the question number one. Question number two was about the energy efficiency, and again, Mukherjee sir, to you. From energy perspective, we are doing phenomenal job in bringing most efficient refrigerators or air conditioners in the country. And I was doing the same thing. There was a very old air conditioner in my mother's room. We changed that with the hot and cold inverter and all that stuff. And after 1.5 years, my mother used called me and said, "Yaar, is AC में वो बात नहीं है जो वो पहले AC में थी." And that forced me to evaluate technically what have changed, because I have used the same 1.5 ton air conditioner. Probably because of the making the air conditioner more efficient, we somehow forgotten the other challenges, which is, if we are using micro channels, the oil foiling is going to impact us more. If we are changing the refrigerant and we are evaluating that at what, what will be the penalty in terms of high ambient conditions, so derating of the capacity, of earlier refrigerant versus these refrigerants, probably we missed out. So, you know, we are seeing these challenge as a consumer also, and since we sell tools and you know, chemicals for maintenance of those, so we know the industry is finding. So probably we need to put, you know, energy standard along with the energy standard. If somehow we can manage, you know, if we don't do any maintenance for, you know, this much period or something, how derating is going to happen. So probably if we can do that, because, you know, expecting everyone to clean every 2 months is going to be tough. So we need to see, you know, how it impacts, how energy derating happens at a later stage. Thank you.
You want us to remain here for the rest of the day? Okay, so any other question? I think because we will not be taking any more questions after this. So last question there, yeah. And keep it brief, and then.
I am from Brass. My question is for Rama and Seema. That due to new gases, the gases are high pressure and flammable. Accident level is increased. The companies are giving training for their dealers only, but the other technicians are there who are operating and installations machines, and maintenance also done. So we are giving training as a RAS, but that is not enough. So can Rama or Seema come up to something do for that, like training center or training in each and every states?
Okay, so maybe brief responses.
I just come to quickly to Mr. Kishore's question.
I think I'm cognizant of the time. We are 5 minutes over time, I think allotted, so just keep it like 1 or 2 minutes.
I just answered to Mr. Kishore's question. The penetration level of India is low. How to increase? Okay. So the affordability is the question mark. Now the big problem is between the standards, MEPS, refrigerant change, industry investment, the cost of the product, everything. Again, it is the affordability. It's the big question mark actually. The only way is, the answer is ICAP. ICAP, there is 2 points. One is the product, another is the buildings. So buildings point, still it is pending. I think in the morning session, a lot of deliberations is there, where now the government is acting, and the issue of government licensing or whatever implementation. If buildings are being mandated with the, you know, the standards, you know, whatever this thing, then automatically, you know, today per ton AC is around 100 square feet. It simply go to 400 or 300 to 350 square feet per ton. You know, per square meter air conditioning will be it will be much lesser. If you compare with China is the non-tropical or tropical kind of thing, where the main average tonnage of the household air conditioning is 1 tonner. In case of India, it is 1.5 ton. You see that BE 60-70% is 1.5 ton, which we used to be sell. So automatically with the ICAP, as for ICAP, the regulations in the building sector will be implemented. Automatically, the average tonnage of per square feet area will be further reduced, affordability increase, the penetration will drastically change. So I think it is all on the papers, the working is going on. If the implementation will happen in the building sector, whether it is you know, the regulations of the ratings of the building, automatically the affordability will increase, and the air conditioning penetration will certainly increase.
Yeah. I think, sir, you had 2 questions, one on the maintenance and on the safety. So let me first take your first maintenance question. Recently, the BIS External Committee, they decided that, you know, we should go ahead with having a standard on installation, selection, maintenance, and operation. So maintenance is very much a part of that. So that will talk about the preventive also, and also the periodic maintenance also. So I think, I mean, once it is in the black and white, so definitely I think all of us will be educated, and maybe the service technicians can also follow that. Coming to safety, the standards which I referred, IEC 60335-2-40, and there is another standard, ISO 5149. There's in 3-4 parts. So 5149, it talks about the entire refrigeration systems, the total plant and all that. But 60335-2-40, it talks about the safety of the product as such, and it has addressed the mechanical safety, electrical safety, and fire safety. Fire safety may be because of some other reasons, and the more important is that flammability, because of the abnormal functions and malfunctionings of the equipment, of any parts of the components. So it also talks very much detail into that. But definitely that a standard is there to which ensures the safety of electrical, mechanical, and flame and fire. Thank you.
I just answer quickly to Mr. Kapil's point. Earlier product you said it's very good and now products are degraded. I think it's the myth, I feel, because earlier products are more on rugged, which is the weight. If you see the room air conditioner earlier, way back, it is more than 100 kilos. Today it is maybe 70 or 60 kilos. I'm just giving a rough calculation, but the efficiency level far better. Whenever the energy efficiency is increased, doesn't mean that degrading the components. It is basically improving the components to meeting that levels. So I think that is a myth of that weight. More weight is, अगर ambassador है तो बड़ा weight है तो बड़ा चलेगा, ऐसा नहीं है. Now the cars are which is coming much more efficient than ambassador. I think the people should understand that the new products, new technology is being adopted quickly by the new generations. The old generation, of course, they have to think and they have to understand the technology what is being.
Gaurav, quickly.
Yeah, quickly, just to answer Kishore's question, we have all seen the progress and success of inverterization in India. In these almost 8-9 years, we have seen inverter proportion from 3% to almost more than 70%, I believe, as per the latest information. So even as per ICAP, as Mr. Vasu already touched upon, the projections are taken 5 years from now is almost touching 20 million market. So that market will not go into tier 1 city. That proportion is going to do in tier 3, tier 4 cities where affordability is still a challenge. So I believe the penetration is going to increase in probably these 5 years to 7 years. But manufacturers are doing their own effort. I strongly, advocate for incentivization if it is possible from the government side. Being a non-profit organization, I think if you can push, I think it will make a lot of sense for those consumers who are still not able to afford air conditioners. And to the gentleman from RAS, I believe this is the shortest answer to your question. Please get in touch with Rama. Thank you.
So, thank you. So with that, we come to a close, and I'm very happy that I think India Cooling Action Plan keeps, I think, getting discussed, and how it has helped mobilize what we call triple sector, public sector, private sector, and civil society organizations, and really is used as an example of what can be done. We know that on the implementation front, a lot of work still has to be done. And I would like to thank again Rahul, Srinivasuji, Gaurav, and Mr. Mukherjee for being such wonderful panelists, and the audience for patiently listening to our esteemed panelists. So let us give them a round of applause.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Before we end this session, I would like to call upon Mr. Sameet Quatra, Policy Director, Nrdc India Program, to present the mementos to the panel. I once again thank all the eminent panelists and speakers on the stage. I would now like to call upon stage for the concluding remarks and vote of thanks to Mr. Ashish Saraswat, Associate Fellow TERI. Over to you, sir.
So I would not take much of time and not would would not make it much heavier as we are almost closing the session. I just want to thank all the speakers here and the moderators especially, who have taken the sessions very successfully, and we were really enlightened with the views that were shared by the expertise. And I really found it, and I believe that audience must have found all these sessions very interactive, very knowledge gaining in terms of the refrigerants, in terms of the building codes, in terms of the energy efficiency, especially in the era when Kigali Amendment is there and India has to follow the Kigali Amendment's trajectory. And in the last, I would thank my TERI team, Shivam, Gaurav, Rohit, and especially to Ria, who has done a lot of work to make this event happening very successfully. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.